Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Transport Forum. It's the 18th of May, Tuesday, and we're excited to see all the faces again today. Today we're talking about special economic zones and industrial parks, and we're proudly hosted by DBI, Automotive Investment Holdings, and Zutari. We will give opportunity just now for our colleagues to introduce themselves. While we align more people into the meeting, we can just do a little bit housekeeping. There might be some of our colleagues that's not used to Zoom yet or how it works. So let me quickly brief you. All right, so during this event, kindly keep yourself on mute. We appreciate the meeting scenario where people can unmute themselves and talk to the panelists and the audience, yeah, that's been recognized. So keep yourself on mute. We will really appreciate that. Otherwise, we have too many background noises. You're welcome to open up the participants box at the bottom of your screen. And you should see there's the list of people joining the session, and you're welcome to mouse over your own name and you can rename yourself. Should your device name is displaying or something went wrong, then you can rename yourself. You're also welcome to use the chat room. You'll see also at the bottom of the room there's a chat room. You're welcome to greet each other there, leave your contact details, do some networking. Please don't do promotional work in the chat room. We try to focus on the event itself and what it's all about, but you're welcome to share your contact details and so on. That's not a problem. Yes, and then, ladies and gents, should something go wrong during this session, please keep an eye on your mail inbox. Then we will make alternative arrangements and send you email to join the session again. It's never happened, but we can't always be too sure. Yes, so we keep the panel discussion to have the questions and answers. We do not encourage questions and so on during the presentations. So you're welcome to either type your questions in the chat room, or you can wait till the panel discussion, then you'll give opportunity then to raise your hand in the chat room, or sorry, in the participants box, and we will recognize you and you're welcome then to ask your question. I see there's already a few people on YouTube following. The guys on YouTube are welcome to text your questions in YouTube, and we will also make sure that your questions reach the panelists. All right, so the presentations presented today that's been made available for the public domain will be shared and uploaded to the Transport Forum website for you to download them. It is complimentary. And saying the word complimentary, obviously there's somebody paying for this Transport Forum. We're now in operation for more than 14 years. We're blessed and privileged in being able to provide this platform, and it's been known as one of the most powerful platforms of communication in South Africa in the transport sector. So, and it's all thanks to your support. So I would love then to share my screen, and then you can follow me, with the program of today. And just get our program up here. Right, so there's our program, and you can see we've got wonderful sponsors making the Transport Forum possible. And we would like to give recognition to these sponsors. And we're also proud as the Transport Forum to have formal industry alliances. Those are professional bodies joining the Transport Forum on a formal basis to be part of the Transport Forum, and that is the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, I don't know if there's somebody from SAF who want to say a few words, perhaps. They represent the freight forwarding and clearing industry. We've got the South African Express Parcels Association, Express Logistics Industry. There's somebody from these organizations. You're welcome to, unmute yourself. The South African Bus Operators Association. They say they're the voice for the bus and coach industry. We've got the African Rail Industry Association, previously known as the Railroad Association of South Africa. They're doing very good work also for third-party access into the rail system, representing the rail industry. And then the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. So there's nobody from them that want to say a few words. We just want to express our appreciation for them being formally aligned with the Transport Forum. And obviously on our website, ladies and gents, you should be able to find all the links to these organizations. Should you not be a member yet and you're in one of those fields of expertise, then we would highly recommend that you support them and that they can represent you in the industry. The Transport Forum is not a platform that we represent anybody. We also do not have members. As you're experiencing, we have subscribers and participants, but we do not represent anybody. That's the work of the professional bodies. All right, then let's move on to our media, official or formal media partners. It's Freight News. I don't know if there's somebody from Freight News who want to say a few words this morning. Right, they say that it's authoritative and insightful and produced weekly, Freight News, covering trade, transport, logistics, and related issues. Features are produced and distributed online in a PDF format the week they are released. At month-end, features are added to the printed compendium and distributed to importers, exporters, and their service providers. The distribution is similar to the previous distribution of Freight and Trading Weekly. Now, Freight News been part of the Transport Forum since the start. We've got Railways Africa magazine. This is all about rail infrastructure. They say it's the Africa Continent Specialists Trade, Technical Business-to-Business publication and online news service, covering all aspects of the rail sector, with the current investment and future potential investment being made in rail and road infrastructure projects. Railways Africa brings both global and local consultants, manufacturers, suppliers, and OEMs to the fore. Published weekly online and in print 6 times a year, Railways Africa is the authoritative publication for the rail industry in Africa. Great having them around. Obviously, we've got other media houses supporting the Transport Forum as well, like Mafenta, thank you very much, from Engineering News and so on, Crema Media. We really appreciate your kind support. All right, then let's go to our sponsors. Right, so we mainly hosted today by Zutari. I don't know if there's somebody, Phil, from Zutari want to say a few words.
Thank you, Harry. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Phil. Thank you.
Okay, let me just.
We can hear you.
Harry, is it better?
Yeah, it's gone. It's perfect.
Okay, let me see if you can see me as well, Harry.
Thank you. We can.
Okay, great. Good to be here, and thanks, Harry. So Zutari is a multidisciplinary engineering infrastructure advisory company. And as many know, we're active throughout the continent. We've been a proud sponsor of the Transport Forum, as we believe it provides a fantastic platform for us to understand the difficult problems of our clients and end users as we seek to co-create real impactful solutions. We've been involved with many of the SEZs, IDZs, logistics hubs, and we've been doing things like planning studies, the infrastructure and building services and structures. And we understand the role of these SEZs in reigniting manufacturing-led industrialization in an accelerated manner, and the real importance of public-private sector partnerships in things like repositioning our cities going forward. And it's one of the reasons that we decided to co-sponsor this particular special event. So meeting the future opportunities, challenges of these parks, we have integrated solutions which we believe can make a difference. And those include things like repurposing of facilities, designing for flexible wellness and health, sustainable energy and water performance of buildings or portfolios, carbon zero strategies, etc. So we're really looking forward to the discussion and co-creating world-class SEZs for the future benefit of all South Africans. And Harry, while I'm on the call, we've also got in the room here Sudesh Maharaj. Some of you will meet him. He'll be the official client director in future. I retire at the end of June, and he'll be taking our sponsorship of the forum forward. And it's been a great pleasure for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Concerning words that you're stepping aside, but I trust you will still be very much involved in the industry. Yeah, thank you for introducing us to the new colleague. We're really looking forward to be working with you. Thank you, Phil. And to Zutori. Ladies and gents, then we go forward to Total Infrastructure Solutions by DVI. Somebody from them want to say a few words? All right, obviously we'll give more.
Thank you very much, Harry. And
There you go.
yeah, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. DBI is a consulting engineering firm which partners with clients across South Africa currently to solve complex challenges in the infrastructure sector. And our aim is to really leave a mark for future generations. And this is premised on the belief that we hold that infrastructure unlocks economic potential and creates opportunities for everyone. As a business, we are solutions orientated. We're not faced by any size of a problem. And we operate across functional infrastructure projects. And our key theme in doing so is to always bring innovation to address whatever the needs that might arise. We service primarily clients within South Africa, as I earlier said, in the public and private sector. And those clients rely on us to take the most complex challenges and pioneer innovative solutions that push them to limits that they aspire to achieve. And why are we really a preferred business, besides the fact that we are emerging and have got an average age of about 40 maximum within the firm? It's because we are really an empowering firm and hold ourselves accountable to our clients. And we're able to adapt to any form of requirements that the clients have, as long as that it's ethical. We provide clients with quality of service, while at the same time we leverage on our partners like Zutari and AIH and others to undertake the most daunting task and challenging assignments. So far, we seem to be achieving a lot because we function as part of an ecosystem and we leverage on our relationships, on our strategic partners, because we believe that the new trunks rise as a result of the existence of trunks around them. And our valuable resources in this instance are our partners that we actually are with today on this forum. We are pretty much future-focused entity, and we are challenging traditional norms in the delivery of the services that we render. We are envisioning a future that is extraordinary, considering the vast amount of opportunities that Africa possesses. And it's unquestionable that we believe that we're in the right space. And this forum, amongst others, provides us with a platform to share the ideas that we have to solve that is within our domain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DBI. Much appreciated for your involvement and support. Right. Automotive Industry Holdings, somebody from them to say a few words.
Thank you very much. Sorry, we got a bit of feedback there. Can you hear me now, Harry?
You're perfect. Thank you, Paulo.
Okay, great. My name is Paulo Fernandes. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. I'm from the company AIH Econogistics. We're part of the AIH group. Econogistics is a consulting company in the economic development space, operating across multiple sectors from policy formulation right through to program identification and implementation. One of the areas that we have been particularly active in is in the development of special economic zones, particularly the early part of the development cycle, looking at feasibility studies, bankability studies, sector studies that accompany many of these special economic zones. At this stage, between Econogistics and the broader group, AIH, we've probably worked in excess of 8 or 9 special economic zones in South Africa. And we have also worked on the special economic zones program in countries like Mozambique, Zambia, Botswana, and even in Namibia, or in logistics and industrial parks in Namibia. As individuals, we've been involved in this space for some time. Many of the individuals that we have were part of the team that developed the first automotive logistics park in Roslyn, the supplier park development company. As a group, and we will hear a little bit more about this later in the presentation, we're also in a fairly unique position in being investors in 3 of the special economic zones in South Africa. And that gives us, I think, a very different and unique perspective as to what investors are looking for. We've partnered with the DTI and many of the provincial government agencies over many years in the development of these zones, and we are very keenly interested in their success and in their progress, and it's for that that we're very proud to be part of the sponsors of this session. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you so much, Paulo. Indeed, we're proud having you on board as well. Thank you for your kind support. Right, ladies and gents, that takes us to University of Johannesburg. It's the Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management. They have the Institute for Transport and Logistics Studies. They've been part of this Transport Forum since the inception of the Transport Forum. Prof. Jackie and them, Prof. Nadine Pizza, always supporting us and also mentoring myself quite a lot. So thank you very much for them. We've got C-Track. I don't know if there's somebody from C-Track want to say a few words. So C-Track, it's all about making things visible. They say they assist their clients to transform their business with innovative software and software as a service solution, Internet of Things, and mobile solutions. They're passionate about changing the way businesses communicate, collaborate, and operate around the world, allowing you to take action on the insights from the cutting-edge devices on cloud platforms. Their support and hardware solutions come together in a clever, user-friendly, and powerful software systems, enabling your business to always be visible. You cannot, in today's times, not being visible anymore. So thank you to C-Track, also being part of us since the start of the Transport Forum, gold sponsor. Global Trade Solutions, somebody from GTS to say a few words. I'm doing hard work again this morning. Global Trade Solution, about 3 years already a gold sponsor. GTS is a user-friendly, cloud-based international trade and supply chain solution that incorporates the core requirements to manage all activities around international supply chain in a compliant and cost-effective manner. GTS offers seamless integration with the various entities in the international supply chain, including the statutory agencies such as customs authorities. Thank you, GTS, for your kind support. Bird Air Cargo. So somebody from BidAir want to say a few words? So first year being the proud gold sponsor of Transport Forum. They were established in 1996 as Express Air Services, whose fleet of freighter aircraft operated an overnight hub and spoke domestic network. Over the years, we have constantly evolved as a business, learned lessons, and have made numerous changes to our business model. Now as BidAir Cargo, we offer various African passenger airlines and air freight services agreement to manage their underutilized cargo capacity. The airline gains revenue from the cargo capacity which BidAir Cargo manages and makes available to the express parcel industry. We also have developed other handling and marketing services for domestic and regional airlines. In 2014, BidAir Cargo acquired the business of Imperial Air Cargo, which operates overnight freighter service in South Africa with a fleet of dedicated B737 freighter aircraft. Thank you, BidAir Cargo, for your gold sponsorship. Cuba, somebody from Cuba perhaps? Cuba is all about automatic fare collection. They say they believe in ticketing should be safe, simple, and secure. That's why they deliver ticket as a service. They say for too long, ticketing service has been complex, inefficient, and expensive. Transport operators have spent years and millions installing, upgrading, and maintaining ineffective systems that passengers didn't understand. Well, no longer, they say. Cuba's lean, efficient, and scalable platform provides a modern solution to a traditional problem. Our range of plug-and-play systems are deployed in a matter of weeks and seamlessly grow with operators' changing needs. With clients across the world in offices in London, Johannesburg, Rome, and Bessengon, we are a truly global company with a truly global vision to banish the burden of ticketing. Thank you, Cuba. Many years already a gold sponsor of the Transport Forum. Standard Bank. Anybody from Standard Bank will say a few words? Standard Bank's been an ad hoc sponsor of the Transport Forum for many years. And last year, October, they joined us for the first time as a gold sponsor. Those of you might be wondering, the gold sponsorship is an annual agreement with the Transport Forum, and that gives you a very reasonable pricing for some of the most powerful exposure in the transport sector in South Africa. If you want to know more about the sponsorship opportunities, you're welcome to contact myself. Obviously, our contact details are on the web. So Standard Bank, they say, is a leading Africa-first financial services organization. Africa is our home, and we drive her growth. Thank you, Kathy Bell. She's very much involved from Standard Bank with the Transport Forum and the RTMS system. Easy Clear. Somebody from Easy Clear? Easy Clear is the first-year gold sponsor, provides software as a service to the freight forwarding industry, freight forwarding, clearing, and logistics community in South Africa and neighboring beyond its countries. They strive to ensure service excellence through the expert team who understand the freight forwarding and customs clearing industry. We have also forged strong relationships with SAS, SAF, IATA, and TSBA to ensure that you, the client, are kept up to speed with industry developments and changes. Thank you so much, Easy Clear, for your gold sponsorship. JC Auditors, somebody from JC Auditors. So JC Auditors credited certifications are recognized globally. We work with clients and develop specific solutions. Our goal is to provide professional, efficient, and certified certification solutions, enabling clients to achieve their business goals. Thank you, JC Auditors. The Obunya Group, it's Obunya Capital. Obunya is all about integration in the public sector, in the public transport sector. We see Lee Majola is heading up the Obunya Group, and they focus very much in getting the taxi industry recognized as a full mode of transport in our transport sector. Thank you, Pusile, for your kind support. Huawei. In Anybody from Huawei, perhaps? Right, we tend to think that Huawei only sells cell phones. That's not the case, actually. Huawei is very much involved and in the transport sector of intelligent transport systems. Thomas Snyman from Huawei is actually supporting us quite a lot from Huawei. And he's also going to present in one of our next events again. He's previously been the ITS director for the Ekurhuleni municipality. Kindly visit the website, ladies and gents. You will be impressed to see what systems they are providing in the freight and logistics industry in terms of intelligent transport systems. Thank you, Huawei, for joining in. All right, so ladies and gents, that's bringing us to the end of the introductions. I think we can give our sponsors a big hand for making the Transport Forum possible so that the rest of us can participate complimentary. The presentations also will be uploaded to our website complimentary this afternoon still. And you can download them from that website, very popular website. And should you visit the website, you will see there's a user login that you can use to log in. Should you not have an account yet, you can create your own account by selecting sign up on the website, and that sign up function should give you then a little simple process to create an account for yourself, complimentary. After you've done that, then you can sign up username and password. That will give you access to the downloads feature. So you go to events and you select downloads, and that should give you your little search engine. This actually, should you search something with this search engine, it searches through all 14 years worth of presentations. Very powerful knowledge base, extremely powerful. So for example, if you use that field and you type in a title or a person's surname or whatever, it will give you all the presentations presented over the past 14 years by that person or related to that topic. Or you can go to category and you can select today's date, and you should be able to, obviously download the presentation presented today. All right, remember about our business directory. It's been outsourced to Olga Mashilu's company, Berlin Bondle Consultant. She's doing excellent work in making sure that your company is being listed in the popular business directory of the Transport Forum, well categorized and so on. Companies are telling us they're getting huge exposure for this. And you know what? That's only 450 rands a year. That's really not a lot of money. And all the revenue goes to Berlin Bondle Consultant and their associates. It's one of our empowerment initiatives. We've got quite a number of empowerment initiatives of the Transport Forum. And take a picture, take the note of Olga's number there. She can help to get your company listed. Also, after this event, you should get feedback, an email with a feedback form that we kindly request you to provide feedback on the event. We always appreciate when you share with us potential topics for the future to be presented at the Transport Forum. And there you will also have an option to indicate whether you want Olga to contact you to get your company listed. So please make use of this. It's for a very good cause and it's definitely worth your while. All right, so back to our program. We're talking about special economic zones and industrial parks. And our co-host here, Dr. Paulo Fernandes, Chief Executive Officer of Econogistics, is going to set the scene for us. Thank you very much, Paulo.
Thank you, Harry. If I may share my presentation, there we go. Can you all see that?
You can see that. You can just go to there. That's it. Perfect.
All right. Good morning once again, and thank you for the opportunity. I think in setting the scene for any economic discussion right now, the story is unfortunately one that we've all become very used to. We have unprecedented global growth rates. We have increasing competition for diminishing global investment. In the case of South Africa, we have suboptimal growth rates which is something that has been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic, but certainly was a problem that was with us long before the pandemic. This is leading to increasing job losses and record numbers of unemployment and decreasing tax revenues, which is placing increasing fiscal constraints on government and really restricting the options that government has to put in place some kind of economic stimulus. The questions, of course, how does government kickstart the economy in this rather sorry state and sorry environment? And clearly, there are many aspects to the government's economic recovery plan, but special economic zones are central to that economic recovery plan. Special economic zones are formally defined as geographic areas in which the business environment is different from that of the rest of the economy. But the question for us now, sort of 8-9 years into the Special Economic Zone program in South Africa, is whether the special economic zones are really working. And I think there's some key questions which I'd like to perhaps leave with our speakers for the rest of the program, and that is questions like, or those are questions like, what is really special about our special economic zones? Specifically, what is special about our economic zones relative to those elsewhere in the world? Because that's really what we are competing for when we are competing for the investor's dollar. In a recent study, they indicated that there are currently over 5,000 special economic zones around the world, with 240 of those alone being in Africa. So this is definitely a crowded space, and for every investment dollar that is out there, there is a fight to be had to bring that to South Africa. And are the special economic zones that we have having the desired effect on investment, foreign direct investment, increasing manufacturing activity, job creation, etc. And of course, at what cost are they having that effect? I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the CDE report that was launched just last week, a report entitled, "What if South Africa had a special economic zone that was really special?" I think by that very title, the report obviously casts some doubt as to whether we have differentiated ourselves sufficiently in the special economic zone space. But the questions here is, what is the value proposition for the investor faced by increasing options around the world? Is it the world-class infrastructure that we like to put forward? Is it the tax incentives and some of the other incentives that we have attached to the special economic zone? And are these sufficient? What about some of the factors that are really compromising the competitiveness of South Africa at a broader level? Factors such as the utilities. Electricity is an obvious one, but things like water and other services. Issue of transport and logistics costs, particularly for the inland SEZs. Are we doing anything to address, is the SEZ program doing anything to address any disadvantage that the SEZs have by being located inland or by being located at the southern tip of Africa? What about the ease of doing business? Things like setup costs, customs duties, legislative compliance, repatriation of profit. We are currently working with some of the companies that are perhaps moving into the, or looking to move into the Tshwane Automotive SEZ, companies that are new to South Africa. And just on the HR front, there are 17 different pieces of legislation that these companies need to comply with, just on the HR front. Is that really an environment that is considered to be easy to do business in? What about things like visas for expats? And what about what has become a hot topic, the issue of labor rates, etc.? Are we really creating an environment where these factors make the SEZ stand out from the rest of the economy in South Africa? The government approach is obviously to use SEZs to reignite the manufacturing sector. Mahata is going to take us through the government approach and the government program. But we have 10 designated SEZs and another 6 that are being planned. There are probably another 10 to 15 that are being proposed, although not officially recognized. The question is, do we have too many SEZs? Do we have the right SEZs? Do we have the SEZs located in the right space? These are all key questions that I think one needs to consider, debate, and I think will affect the performance. Of the 10 SEZs, have they performed? Have they achieved the desired investments and job creation? I think Moatu will share some figures with us that point to our performance in that regard. More importantly, are they self-sustainable? Are these developments that will, in future, and preferably in the short term, become self-sustainable developments, or will they continue to be a drain on the fiscus and continue to be a drain on the taxpayers' money? I think all of these are key questions that contribute to the success or otherwise of the SEZ program. We're very proud and very glad to have a lineup of speakers that I think address some of the questions that I've put to you in this scene setting session. Mr. Moatu Molafani is the DDG of the DTIC, and he'll take us through the DTI's SEZ program, some of its history, its current performance, and more importantly, how that is being restructured to improve its efficiency and effectiveness. And I think we're already looking forward to your presentation, Moatu. Dr. Pio Voortjes is the acting CEO of the Atlantis SEZ. This is one of the designated SEZs that's in the early stages of establishment. And Dr. Voortjes will take us through some of the challenges that a early phase SEZ is facing in getting itself up and running. Mr. Hendrik Lowe is the acting CEO of the Namakwa SEZ. This is one of the SEZs that's in the planning phase. It's an inland SEZ in a fairly remote area, and I think it presents particular characteristics and particular challenges that Hendrik will share with us, not least of which would be the transport. I've mentioned the AIH Group. We also have Mr. Corey Kotze, the CEO of the AIH Group, which is a local company that currently has operational investments in 2 SEZs and will soon have an investment in a 3rd SEZ. And I think Corey will give us the perspective of what investors really look for in the SEZ and in the SEZ program. And then we have Mr. Dwayne Newman, CEO of COVA Advisory, looking at issues around financing of the SEZs for both the public and the private sector. As the opening speaker to this, I would like to just thank our co-sponsors, Zutari and DBI Engineering. I'd like to thank our host, Harry van Heesteen and the Transport Forum, and of course, all of you as participants. I hope this discussion is constructive and engaging, and I hope we all learn something at the end of these 2 hours. Thank you very much, Harry.
Thank you so much, Paulo. Indeed, proud having you guys on board. Thank you for your support, and thank you for compiling such an excellent panel. We're really looking forward to listening and to engaging with these panelists. So without further ado, I just would like to quickly put up our program again. So our next presenter, or our first presenter then, is Mr. Moatu Molafani, acting DDG of Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And he's going to talk about the South African SEZ program, history of SEZs in industrial parks, strategic policy objectives, success stories, challenges, and opportunities. Thank you, Moatu. We really appreciate your participation.
Thanks very much, Program Director. I'm going to portray the presentation just now. Okay. Is it visible, Program Director?
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. Good. Is it possible to switch on your camera, please?
Let me just try to do that quickly.
There we go. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Program Director. I think as an introduction, I must just welcome this opportunity to share our initiative with the Transport Forum. And I think it's very useful insofar as shaping our policy, because we obviously government officials, but the colleagues such as the stakeholders of the Transport Forum are the ones that deal directly with the critical issues on the ground. We also welcome the feedback from the CEDE report. When we met with Ernst, we said, even though we may differ with the report, but we welcome the fact that the SEZ is now debated. And this is a step in the right direction, because it means that we're no longer going to have government ideas, but we're going to have evidence-based policy that can help us support our industrialization as a country. As Dr. Fernandez has indicated, I think we already know that the SEZ program has got about 10 special economic zones in the country. It's fairly a new program. We started in 2014 when the new legislation was assented. And before then, we had what we called industrial development zone. And before the industrial development zone, we had what we called regional industrial development strategy, which gave effect to a number of industrial parks that we currently have in the country. But maybe just to bring you to this context again, the special economic zones, as again, Fernandez, as you are setting the scene, it did indicate that we currently have over 5,000 special economic zones that are recognized globally. They continue to become and increasingly play an important role in terms of driving industrialization. I think many countries now have recognized that, because the competition is no longer about countries. Competition now is between the cities. So the cities are now repositioning themselves to ensure that they compete globally. Competition is not about South Africa and the UK now. It's about Johannesburg and the City of London. And therefore, in making sure that our cities become competitive, we then have to come up with strategies to ensure that. So we identify strategic areas that can then be treated as special. And I know one of the topics is our special economic zone special. So one of the things that obviously would want to get as a feedback is what can make our special economic zones really special. So the intention is to ensure that we locate those, we identify and designate those areas as special economic zones to drive the economic development and industrialization of our regions and cities. And of course, the reality is that the focus is now shifting away from just tax incentive to state-of-the-art infrastructure, good governance, and ease of doing business. The countries that we visited, the SEZs that we visited, we realized that the key driver is this infrastructure. If you don't have logistics infrastructure, if you don't have industrial infrastructure, and if your governance is not stable, if the ease of doing business is not easy enough, as Fernandez was saying, no one will be interested. You can have zero tax benefits, you can have tax holidays, but if politically, policy-wise, you're not stable, no one would want to invest in your country or in your city. If you don't have infrastructure or you have a collapsed infrastructure, no one would want to invest. But in fact, if you have good governance, ease of doing business, infrastructure, more investors would really be interested to do business in your city. And of course, We also noticed that SEZs are increasingly becoming the best tools also for corridor development and regional integration. As you know, one of our key fundamental policy objectives is to drive regional integration, to say that as the South African economy grows, we must also grow with the rest of SADC, the rest of the SACU, the rest of the African continent. So we're using special economic zone also to integrate some of the value chains. We have an SEZ in Musina. The intention there is to drive the integration of the value chains in the SADC region using logistics, agro-processing, and other opportunities that may exist in that region. The second SEZ that we're going to be piloting is in the Ngomazi area, which is, I think, 20 kilometers from the port of Maputo, but also a few kilometers from Swaziland, but it's also very closely linked to the Asian community. So those are the SEZs that we would be using to drive the regional integration. In terms of corridor development, I think many of our SEZs are linked to the corridor, Dubai Trade Port, linked to entry, Gauteng as well, the Harry Smith or Maluti Apofung, the Ngomazi SEZ linked to N4, Musina Makato linked to N1, and so forth and so forth. And of course, I think Dr. Fernandez also indicated that we're having a number of countries developing special economic zones on the African continent. And the intention is really to attract investment, job creation, and of course, many of the developing countries, they also use the SEZs to address the poverty issues. Many of these countries have actually learned from South Africa. Some of them, we have assist them to drive to develop their SEZ policies and so forth. So the reality is that as a country, we need to position ourselves such that we're not overtaken by events. So we must continue to provide leadership insofar as the SEZ development. And of course, the biggest challenge, as I've indicated, is the infrastructure deficit and the project packaging. Many of these countries on the African continent, they struggle with the packaging of bankable projects. They always say funding is a challenge, but the funders will tell you that just give us projects, then we'll implement. So one of the challenges that we're confronted with is the issue of the investment packaging. I'm not going to dwell much on this slide. This is just about what the SEZ is all about, to say that SEZ is a designated area of a country that is dedicated for specific economic activities, and those economic activities should be supported through some form of support measures that are not generally available to the rest of the country. And of course, there are a number of types of SEZs. You have what we call aerotropolis SEZs. If you go to Dubai Trade Port, as you land in the Kinshasa Airport, you're already in the special economic zone. So SEZ is centered around the airport or aerotropolis. We have multi-sector SEZs such as Kucha, Multi Apofung. You have sector-specific SEZs, and we've got SEZs that are citywide, such as Shenzhen in China. So these are just the types of special economic zones. And of course, someone asked about the tax incentives. We have corporate tax incentives. We've got accelerated depreciation allowance for those that own buildings in special economic zones. We've got custom-free areas for those that import for export, import raw material for export. We've got employment tax incentives. These are national incentives that we provide to special economic zones. At the moment, we have about 6 special economic zones that have been approved in terms of tax incentives. And we continue to work with our colleagues in National Treasury and the SEZ to ensure that all the other special economic zones that have been designated, they also benefit from the tax incentives. The other tax incentives that are maybe non-financial include integrated and simplified procedures through one-stop centers that are driven by the DTI as well, to ensure that we support our investors through these one-stop centers. So the intention really is just to ensure that we accelerate processes, visas, EIAs, and many other things. And of course, the general infrastructure support that is outside the zone, including the road infrastructure, the logistics support, and of course, the whole intention of creating special economic zone is also to ensure that we've got secure and safe neighborhood. In other areas, such as Atlantis, you see municipalities playing a critical role insofar as providing the municipal incentives. And some of these municipal incentives may not be financial, but just to ensure that we streamline and accelerate the processes of approving the building plans, the processes of finalizing the infrastructure agreements and other related matters or land preparation issues. So the intention is just to ensure that indeed the SEZ is treated as special and our investors do not have to struggle. I mean, you all know that if you're an investor and you want to invest in South Africa or any country, there are pieces of legislations that you need to comply with. As an example, if you want a land from a municipality, those processes are governed by municipal finance systems, they're governed by laws, they're governed by other town planning processes. So if you are lucky, you may get the land in 18 months. But with our special economic zones, we are saying that as soon as an investor is ready, we just need to put the infrastructure on site. There's no need for us to wait for 18 months for all these processes. And I think Dr. Fernandez again just gave you a synopsis of how many special economic zones we have in the country. We do have 10. The first one is Mosina Makhado, as I've explained, which is at the border of South Africa and Zimbabwe. The second one is Ngomazi SEZ in the Ngomasi area in Mpumalanga in the region called Ihlanzeni. We have two in the KZN, Richards Bay, IDZ, Dube Trade Port. We have two in the Eastern Cape, East London and Guha, which are the oldest. We have two in the Western Cape, that is Saldanha Bay and Atlantis. We have one in the Free State, it's called Multi Apofun. We have two in Gauteng, which is called, they're called Gauteng IDZ, or formerly known as OR Tambo IDZ, as well as Tshwane Automotive SEZ. And of course, we have about 5 proposed special economic zones that we're currently working on. The first one is Wild Coast in the Eastern Cape. The second one is Dubatse. The third one is Vaal River SEZ in the Gauteng province. The fourth one is Bujanala SEZ in the Northwest province. And the last one is Namakwa, or proposed Namakwa SEZ in the Northern Cape. These proposed SEZs, they are at the different stages of development. The proposed SEZs such as Bujanala and Namakwa, they have already submitted the applications. So we are considering them and working with provinces jointly. Other SEZs such as Dubatse, they're finalizing their business plans. But what we have already agreed on as part of the new approach to special economic zone is that while we're doing the regulatory processes, in parallel, we're going to have to work with provinces to provide infrastructure. Where there's already investment appetite, we need to provide that infrastructure and locate those investments. Where there's critical infrastructure that is required, as an example, if you want to invest in the Limpopo province, there is a need to revamp the R555, I think it's R555, that links Middelburg to Steelport area. So we're going to have to work with all the other critical stakeholders to ensure that we provide that infrastructure. If you are located in the Tshwane Automotive SEZ, while we're building the infrastructure, we're already planning to build a corridor between the Eastern Cape and the Tshwane Automotive SEZ in the form of rail infrastructure to ensure that we're able to support the TASAs and the Ford investments. So those are parallel processes that, so the intention really is to say that if we agree and we identify an area as an economic hub or a potential economic hub, we immediately develop that area. So SEZ is not an end goal. SEZ is just a sweetener. The end goal is to ensure that we develop and industrialize that region. This slide is just trying to portray to you what has been achieved to date in terms of investments and in terms of jobs. To date, we've attracted 230 investments. When we introduced this program 7 years ago, I think we had around 40 companies. Since the introduction of this project, you can see we attracted over 180 companies. The investment value thereof, this is private investment, we're sitting at 55.8 billion. The potential jobs and jobs that are already created, we're sitting at over 25,000. 143 of these companies are already inside the zones. However, there are other companies such as the 12 investors that we're currently building infrastructure for at TASAs and Saldanha Bay IDZ, Richards Bay, Kucha, East London, that we're currently building the top structures for. So the intention is that by the end of the financial year, the number of operational companies will have increased. So the number of those companies that we currently assisting in terms of infrastructure, we're sitting at 87. The investment value thereof, it's around 36 billion. The current investment value of those that are already operational is around 20 billion. And of course, this has created 15,392 jobs. These are direct jobs. They exclude multipliers, they exclude your transportation, they exclude the security, catering, and all the other support. These are just factory floor jobs that you can easily access via IDs and everything with this revenue. So these are audited numbers. So since 2014, when we started with the implementation of the SEZ, I think a few years down the line, we decided that, look, 5 years or 4 years is enough. Let's assess what we have done and let us identify our critical challenges, where there's challenges. And these are the factors that we're able to identify through that introspection or assessment of the SEZ program. On the right, these are factors that we realize that those SEZs that are performing quite well, they were able to get right. And on the left, these are the SEZs that are struggling, and we identified what made them to struggle. And of course, what makes the SEZ flourish, the first thing is bankable and clearly defined value proposition of the SEZ. If you don't have a concrete bankable business plan, it's unlikely that the SEZs would be able to flourish. The second thing that we realized is one of the factors that led to the struggling of the SEZs is we realized that some of the SEZs, we actually designated them prematurely. So one of the things that we need to do is to ensure that before you designate SEZ, you need to get your systems in place such that by the time you designate that SEZ, is all systems go. You don't have to start with the things that you could have addressed before designation. The other issue is the effective stakeholder management. In some instances, you realize that the SEZ is struggling simply because the investors are unable to get visas, as Dr. Fernandez has indicated, or in some instances, we are unable to get the issue of building plans approved by the municipality because there's no linkage between the SEZ and the municipality. The capacity of the SEZ. In SEZ, such as, I'll give an example about Kucha, you had a CEO that was there for quite a number of years that brought stability in the executive management. In other SEZ, the challenge has always been an inadequate capacity. And of course, high turnover of critical and experienced employees. But in those that were successful, we also had a very well-defined and packaged long-term plans, such as the SEZ, such as the Dubai Trade Port. That is why it's one of the fastest moving SEZ, because we were able to package a long-term strategy that is supported by short to medium-term plans. And of course, the stable and predictable governance systems, competent board members. Those are some of the factors that lead to a successful SEZ. So overall, then we had to come up with the mitigation strategy in terms of how do we then drive a very solid SEZ program, learning from the challenges that we have identified. One of them is the issue of the strong involvement of national government. Our SEZs were generally driven by local spheres of government, but we are now saying all the SEZs that we're planning or currently developing would be jointly managed and implemented by national government and all spheres of government. And we also established an national implementing mechanism that will assist us in making sure that all these strategies are implemented adequately. We also using some of the SEZs to provide support to the new ones. A classical example is Kucha, that is currently helping us to drive the infrastructure. Tshwane is one of those special economic zones that was designated within 1 year, and the infrastructure was started within the same year, simply because we were using it to experiment this new plan or new approach. And of course, as indicated, we're no longer going to designate SEZs prematurely. So before we designate an SEZ, I think this responds to Fernando's question in terms of the numbers and whether we should continue to designate SEZ. We will continue to designate number of SEZs, but we can only designate an SEZ if there is a strong commitment from investors. So there's no SEZs that will be designated on the basis and hopes that there will be investors coming. Before we designate, there should be investors. So some could view this as a chicken and egg. That is why we are saying, before we even think of designation, if we think that area has got potential, all three spheres of government work together, put infrastructure there, attract investors, and then we use SEZ as a sweetener. We have done this before in SEZs such as Dubai Trade Port. It took us 3 months to designate Dubai Trade Port because it was an already oiled machine that province was able to drive without using the SEZ as an end goal. And of course, our SEZ should be demand driven as opposed to supply driven. So our SEZ should be driven by private sector. Private sector should be the ones that create a demand as opposed to state building infrastructure with the hope that investors would be then attracted. And of course, one of the things that we're doing here is to ensure that as we develop special economic zone, we must make sure that our investors or private sector is involved from the outset. And I think I've spoken enough about the collaboration between three spheres of government. We're no longer going to designate SEZ that is driven by one sphere of government, but we're going to develop SEZs that is driven by all spheres of government. And of course, we also upscaling our industrial parks program. We have a number of industrial parks that are state-owned, that have in a state of collapse because of infrastructure deficit and many other issues. So we're going to use our SEZ program to upscale a number of these industrial parks or strategic industrial parks, especially where there's high investment appetite, and of course, they're strategically located because location is also important. some of these SEZ, I mean, industrial parks, I can give example. Babelege, there's strong appetite from investors, especially in the automotive sector. The suppliers of BMW, Nissan, Ford, some of them want to go and locate in Babelege, but they are discouraged because of the state of infrastructure there. Some of these investors want to locate in the Bronkhorstspruit or Ikandastria, but they are discouraged on the basis of the state of the infrastructure. So we're going to upscale the program to ensure that we support the industrial parks such as those. And of course, when we do that, we're not going to just go and put up infrastructure. They have to be supported by long-term master plans or strategies. And of course, the strategy should go beyond just the provision of infrastructure. We need to understand the regional needs and dynamics. And of course, the new approach is that we're going to develop the industrial ecosystem that is supported by a number of other things. We're not going to focus just on manufacturing, but we need to ensure that there's logistical issues that are taken into consideration. There's issue of education, environmental protection, recreational activities, enterprise support. So those are some of the activities that we're also going to be doing. But in doing that, everything will be implemented within the context of the district model. So that means that everyone that implements the SEZ would have a single plan for all spheres of government. And of course, in doing that, there's also going to be tit for tat. If a particular agency or province wants us to upscale the industrial park and work with them, there are conditions. A part of the condition is that the funding should be derived from all spheres of government. It's not going to be a DTI that provides funding for the infrastructure. And of course, one of the challenges that we have in our industrial parks is that they generate revenue, but the revenue is not used to reinvest. But we are saying that as we develop those industrial parks, revenue that is generated in that industrial parks must stay and be reinvested in that industrial park. Also, in doing that, we're going to be working with the authorities that are responsible for water, land, electricity to ensure that we use that at a discounted value to attract more investors. And of course, governance arrangements, we do believe and think that the SEZ has got stable governance arrangements. So any industrial park that we're going to be targeting would have to align itself with the government governance arrangements. So as I've indicated, this is just to illustrate the new approach that as soon as Cabinet approves the new approach in terms of making sure that spheres of government work together, in terms of making sure that national government gets involved, we immediately designated Tshwane Automotive SEZ in partnership with Ford, which was the main anchor because our SEZ was catalyzed by their investment. So we worked with spheres of government, including Ford, to ensure that we provide state-of-the-art facility there. The SEZ is owned by the 3 spheres of government. The representation of the board consists of the 3 spheres of government, including the Ford representatives. And through this partnership, I'm proud to say that some of the things we're able to accelerate and win them as swiftly as possible. The issues of township establishment, EIA, we were able to get EIA and township establishment approved in 3 months, which ordinarily takes long. Water use license, I think we're able to work with the National Water Department of Sanitation, and we got it, I think, in 5 to 6 months. And funding for infrastructure was immediately sourced from all spheres of government, with Tshwane and Gauteng building bulk infrastructure, Tshwane providing the land, DTI putting top infrastructure. Within a year, we started with the construction of 12 factories in that SEZ, and 12 investors were identified and secured. This is just to illustrate again how we're going to be using the SEZ to link with other strategic and international ports, including the corridors. And we're saying this is an ideal corridor, but it requires massive support. This comes from the draft National Spatial Development Framework. You can see the linkage between Musina and the Atlantis. It goes as far as Musina and Tuetripo. So the intention is to ensure that we've got SEZs that are linked, SEZs that are strategically also linked to the international market, SEZs and the strategic ports in the eastern, in the KZN, linked to the Asian markets, in the Western Cape, in the Northern Cape, even SEZs or strategic hubs in the Northwest linked to the African market through Cameroon and so forth. So this is just to illustrate how we think we should be able to drive SEZ linked to the corridor development. That will be all, Chairman. Thank you. And I hope I did not take more than allocated time.
Thank you so much, Mahoto. Excellent presentation. So encouraging to see that the important work you're doing. Clearly, planning this is not for sissies. We believe that this event will contribute in making our SEZs really special, including your presentation and participation. Will you be available later on for the panel discussion?
Yes, I'll be available just until around 11:30. I have to join another meeting at 12.
Thank you very much and noted. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you. I see their hands up for questions, but we will allow questions and answers during the panel discussion. So thank you for that. Ladies and gents, let me get our program up again. All right, ladies and gents, our next presenter is then Dr. Pierre Voges. He's the Acting Chief Executive Officer of Atlantis Special Economic Zone. And he's going to talk to us the lessons learned from Atlantis Special Economic Zone. Thank you, Dr. Voges.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to get it up quickly.
Thank you.
Is it up there? Can you see it?
Yes, you can just go to slideshow mode.
I'm trying to. You can see it?
Yes. Well, can you go to display settings and select a duplicate slideshow, please? At the top of your screen, display settings.
Yeah, I'm on Zoom, so I'm not display settings. Yeah, okay.
That's it. That's it. And click there and the duplicate slideshow.
Got that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been asked to speak about the challenges we've experienced in the Atlantis SEZ and maybe give you some idea of the opportunities we see going forward. I see very much, or we see very much, the SEZ rollout as a practice or practicing the policy determined by national government. And I think sometimes we may have a problem or two with national government, but I think it's a set of rules that one needs to play in and make the best as possible in getting that policy implemented into practice. Just a couple of problems we had thus far. We've been around now for 1 year only. We started our operations on the 1st of April. And we had a couple of challenges that we had to attend to. And the one was sort of political and administrative skepticism in the Western Cape around SEZs and IDZs. And that's still there. And I think the only way you're going to sort that out is to prove to politicians and administrators that this SEZ can work. It can break ground. It can get investors on board and actually create an industrial development zone very much based on a commercial model, which I will refer to a bit later. We had to secure an operational budget within that skepticism. We had to find the right staff blend. I believe that one should have a very strong commercial approach with very strong commercial people, but also have a very strong social approach. And one don't often find those two elements in one person or in one entity. In South Africa, we often talk about community buy-in, but we don't do it. And later you'll see that we've been very successful, I think, the one part of our work we've been quite good at is to get community buy-in, particularly through skills training. Land was a problem, and I'll come to that in a minute, but we'll sorted the land matter out. We have signed land agreement with the City of Cape Town. Many people see Section 25 of the SEZ Act as a problem, and we had to work through it and make a plan how we solve that aspect of the Section 25 saying you must be a business enterprise. We've solved that as well over the last month or two. We still haven't been promulgated in terms of tax incentives, but we'll tackle that chapter once we finally been scheduled as a business enterprise. And then, as Martu has said, and also Paulo, that we're dealing at the moment with a very reluctant investment market, and one needs to be very, very convincing in your approach why you're offering value in your SEZ to the market. If one doesn't offer value, and that is a strong profit line to the investor, well, then I don't think they will sign a lease agreement with any investment SEZ entity for a long period of time. We're following a bit of an unconventional approach, realizing we're dealing in a very different market. We post-COVID, or sort of coming out of COVID a bit, and we need to dance very differently to the market indicators out there. And what we really started doing from the start is to build very strong alliances at the local government level and the national government level. We work well with DTIC, well with National Treasury, and also with the provincial government. I think it's fair to say many SEZs are performing below expectation. There are poor investment pipelines. Martu spoke about executive management capacity. One needs to build a credible administration. If you do not have a credible administration, then I don't think any investor will touch that entity through a lease agreement for a 20-year period. I know it sounds very boring, but that is almost something that's not negotiable. You have to build a strong administration. And then it takes long. How to refer to it, this program has been in place for how many years now, since 2014. The SEZ doesn't spring out of the ground, but one needs to start the wrong way and incrementally push the envelope going forward. We've got a very, very strong commercial approach. We hope to break even in our 7th or 8th year of full operations, which we believe didn't start on the 1st of April. We used the last financial year as a year to put all the building blocks in place, and that is earlier the land, the staff, the business enterprise scheduling, and so forth. I'm a great believer in collaborative planning. One is only as good as the entities and the people around you. And that's why having an acrimonious relationship with national government is just not on. One needs to work very well with those policymakers and also make inputs on an incremental basis how things can be improved going forward. Sustainability, the revenue model, we've worked hard on our revenue model, and that formed the basis of our pitch to the national government around the business enterprise scheduling. We're paying a bit of school fees, and in that school fees, obviously, you try and put the building blocks in place to lead to some more profitable years going forward. I saw the article the other day of Anne Bernstein, and I think she had a point or two, and I think that SEZs maybe should be able to drive the employment rationale much, much stronger. And maybe she's right in saying that there must be some sort of wage incentive to bring that to fruition. SEZs should be great employment creators, but it can only happen through a very strong commercial approach, and a wage incentive may be a way to take that forward. I think a couple of important slides here for me is that we believe that SEZ should be real estate development nodes. It must be managed as real estate development nodes, obviously taking into account some of the sweetness that you can offer to the investors, such as the civil works being paid for and the top structure being paid for. But we are looking at a much, much stronger commercial approach. Then I think sometimes a very strong social approach, maybe too much of a social approach, is offered. I believe in a social approach, but you can only achieve that objective through a very, very strong commercial approach. Our board has approved already an alternative funding model, and I'll mention that as we go through a couple of slides going forward. I'm not going to go into strategic objectives, but very important to mention the word commercial. We are Green Tech SEZ. The investment committee only approves investors that comply with certain criteria that are green. It could either be a green product or it could be a green manufacturing process. It's sometimes a very subjective element, but the criteria helps us to secure only those investors that comply with the green criteria. I mentioned already strong administrative processes. That's above board, and making the investor feel comfortable that they are dealing with an animal in whose hands they will be safe for the odd 20 years lease period going forward. Just some highlights. I think the biggest highlight for us last year, we didn't have the money to buy the land. There's presently 25 hectares of the SEZ East built up through investment, and we had to unlock 94 hectares of the designated SEZ, and we knew we couldn't find the money within the provincial fiscus to buy that land. And what happened then, we negotiated with the City of Cape Town. The City of Cape Town is now a minority shareholder in the SEZ company. The land agreement and the shareholders agreement and the share subscription agreement was signed on the 15th of December last year. And it's not a common model in South Africa. I think very few examples of cities becoming minority shareholders in a state-owned enterprise, a provincial state-owned enterprise, but that's done. And I must say, Tomato and DTI, the National Treasury, was very, very instrumental and supportive in getting to that point. It's a very unique land transaction. I mentioned already that we didn't have the money to buy the land. We tried very hard for a peppercorn lease. That didn't work because of the MFMA not allowing the city to dispose of municipal land below market value. And for us, land is money, and I'll come to how that land is money point at the end led us to convincing National Treasury for us to become a business enterprise in terms of Section 25 of the SEZ Act. Just green tech, I'm not a green specialist, but it's simply 3 points for me, and that is to strive to revenue stream, being resource efficient and also being socially inclusive. We're trying to push the living lab idea quite strongly. As I mentioned, investors must comply with green criteria, but we also try to develop an actual SEZ that is green in itself, not just the investment coming in. Obviously, every SEZ must have a hook. It must have a special kind of feature around it that makes us attractive for investors, and we believe our hook is the green tech hook. We've got excellent infrastructure in place. As you know, and sad to say, Atlantis is a classic example of apartheid, absolutely classic. But it has got good infrastructure lying between Saldanha, IDZ, and the Cape Town port. And we believe the strong infrastructure and the great location and the green tech aspect makes it an attractive SEZ for green tech investors. Just to show you the land in Zone 1, we have applied for our SEZ funding for Zone 1. That application is in already. You'll see the orange part there, that's a present investment. And the lower part, Zone 2 and Zone 3, we'll leave that for now. The land is ours, but we'll try to pay all our attention into Zone 1 and get the remainder of Zone 1 developed over the next couple of years and get ground to be turned on that portion of land. Not a big SEZ, it's quite small, but we're looking at more smaller investors and less bigger investors. And that's why we divided the land in such a way that you can accommodate smaller investors. A total of 118 hectares, of which 25 is built up already. Those are the present investors. The biggest one, Gestamp Renewable Energies, a wind turbine manufacturing company, that's also hoping to expand now based on round 5 renewable energy calls from the national government. The bottom part we haven't really looked at, although we have a pipeline, but I believe pipelines are pipelines. Until you sign a lease agreement, then the pipeline remains a pipeline, and that's why we tried to squeeze our present applications into Zone 1, with the civil works being covered, that funding being covered by the national government. We work very hard with different organizations on the investment promotion campaign. We work well with Westgrow, and I think it's a question of hanging a fishing rod out there, promoting the market out there, getting many people interested, but at the end, you're probably going to find out of all your efforts, you're going to come to 2 or 4 successful investors which will sign lease agreements with you. I'm not going to go too much in the pipeline. Some applications are in, and those applications form the backbone of our SEZ fund application to DTIC. They've given us a 60-day period, a total of 90 days and 60 days working days for those applications to be assessed, and hopefully we will be successful in securing those monies. I think the Western Cape, particularly Cape Town, it's got a nice system in place where you have different organizations working on the investment promotion. Westgrow is an effective marketing organization. Green Cape is a very effective scientific research company that does great work in green economy research, which is forming a good body of knowledge for the SEZ company to lean on. And we have already secured those investors in Zone 1, and the biggest one meaning the investment of Gestamp Renewable Energies, and the challenge now lies in the land that we've unlocked from the city of Cape Town. I think we in difficult times, as Martha has said, and also Paulo, I think we need to dance very, very differently to a market out there. It is extremely important for an SEZ to mitigate the risk of the investor. And the 2 elements we are using at the moment to mitigate that risk is that the civil works will be funded by national government and also the top structures. We will still explore the chapter of the tax incentives, but we are dancing within the rules that we have at the moment and the policy set by national government. And we're trying to really, really push the commercial part of the SEZ very, very strongly. I think that's the only element that will make the SEZ in the long or the medium to long term sustainable. Partnerships, we have very strong partnerships with the local universities through MOIs. We work well with CSIR. They're doing some work for us now on feasibility studies to ensure that our revenue model is much, much stronger. We're doing some water work already funded by GIZ. And we try and build a pool of organizations around us which will provide us with 2 aspects, and that is money, and also a pool of knowledge. And the reason why the City of Cape Town is such an important shareholder in the company is that you also then pull in all the expertise within the city, and you make your building plan process, zoning process, and EIA so much easier if you have the city within your house and not out of your house. Just some of the partnerships we formed already. I know in South Africa we often talk about MOUs, and we try and do something much stronger and try to get some kind of agreements or service level agreements where you have KPIs in respect of both parties, so that you can squeeze those 2 pockets of value out of such an agreement, and that is a body of knowledge and possibly program monies going forward. Infrastructure, I'm not going to go too much into this. We have already an ARUP developed master plan and also an urban regeneration plan, and that forms the basis of our development and rollout and planning, or also our applications to the national government. Community and skills, we've done very good work in this respect. Around 5 million rand of our budget this year only goes to skills development. Many courses being offered to people in Atlantis. Already a fairly skilled area, lots of skills around, but we're trying to build those skills now on a skills audit we've done to see where are the gaps in the present employment market and where does industry see these projected gaps to be, and we train on that basis to enable people to find jobs, not within the SEZ only, but also in the broader enclave of the industrial area in Atlantis, which already is a very, very strong industrial node. And the SEZ company will now be the biggest landowner in that bigger industrial enclave. Just some of the numbers of people we've reached already. It doesn't sound like hundreds and hundreds, but I've been very honest with you to show you what training courses we've offered and how many people have been affected in the past, in the year 2021 already. And I believe this is going to be one of the stronger foundations of the SEZ going forward. I'm not going to go too much into this, just to show you again enterprise development. We're also developing an SMME database that's almost finished, which we'll use once we get to the construction tenders to make sure contractors use that database going forward and not a broader Western Cape or national database, to ensure that we drive the localization aspect to keep jobs as far as possible within the community of Atlantis, which already offers a very, very strong skills base. Just some more information on what we do in terms of training boilermakers, welders, those kind of courses that will probably find its way in finding a job within the SEZ itself, but within a present, very strongly operated industrial development node already. Just one or two more slides. I think we, again, an organization that's merely implementing policy or putting policy into practice. I'm one of those that believe that national government determine that policy. You may have a problem with it here and there, but that's the rules of the game, and you must play within those rules. Although poor policy making and policy uncertainty often has a very negative impact on the investor, because investor has a mid to long-term view on things. South Africa is in trouble at the moment. I think not only the South African market, but since 2013, the whole concept of emerging markets being attractive destinations, that sort of washed away with, and we are part of that scenario where emerging markets are not the flavor of the month at the moment around the whole world, not only in South Africa. How can we overcome our problems? I think, to me, the trust deficit is a problem, and I think we need to put systems in place, particularly good administrations in place, to bolster the confidence and to bridge that gap in terms of the trust deficit. I think we are in competition with other emerging markets, and we need to be very, very competitive in how we project SEZ going forward. And I believe Atlantis, lying between Saldanha and Cape Town, with a good infrastructure in place already, with a strong skills base in place already, gives us that competitive edge, hopefully also with the green tech hook, in providing that certainty to the investor that they are dealing with an entity that's serious about protecting not only the entity's interest, but also the interest of the investor in the next couple of years. So in short, I've run very, very quickly because I had 15 minutes only, but we hope we're doing the right thing. We're dancing more and more the commercial tune, which I think is important for sustainability, and also building a strong revenue model. We believe in very, very strong partnerships with different organizations. And at the moment, the cooperation between the national government, the provincial government, and the local government is strong, particularly with local government providing the land through a sale agreement, the provincial government, the operational budget, and the national government, the license, and also the monies for infrastructure, top structure, and civil works. So that collaborative approach, to me, is probably a strong feature, which we see as a great opportunity to get things done. So maybe the newspaper articles say we're in a bit of trouble. I don't think so. I think if we dance the market properly and we follow a strong commercial route and we play our strengths, then I believe that all these SEZs can play a significant role in their specific areas. We all need to have a home brew based on your own circumstances and your own market sort of projections. And I still think the SEZ is a winning combination to contribute to an economy that will be desperate to try and get out of its present muddy waters. Harry, thank you very, very much. I've been very, very quickly, but I hope I gave you a snapshot of our problems and also of the opportunities we see in taking the SEZ forward. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Such a privilege listening to you. I really appreciate your time. It's great to see this different approach for the SEZs and the innovative way you're bringing in expertise into the SEZs is our scenario. So thank you very much. I'm quite sure the audience is looking forward to engage with you during the panel discussion. Ladies and gents, yes, let's bring up our program. So our next presenter then is Mr. Hendrik Louw. He's the Acting Chief Executive Officer of the Namakwa Special Economic Zone, and he's going to talk about lessons from Inland SEZ. Thank you very much, Hendrik.
Morning. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Hendrik, maybe if you switch off your video.
We're running over time, so you will see also involved in the Uppington. Brilliant. Yeah, as mentioned, sorry, Mr. Chair, we currently caught up. I'm on the road as well because I'm running into a next meeting, seen as the program is running a bit late. But quite important is ladies and gentlemen, is for us in the Namakwa SEZ, and I noted what Mr. Maotumo Lefane said. Go there. Mr. Maotumo Lefane said that it's the proposed Namakwa SEZ, and very important is that this SEZ is out there as a landlocked, seemingly SEZ principle. And it's one of the newer SEZs that is proposed. But in terms of that, and I just quickly want to take us into the presentation now. Sorry, let me just quickly find it there first. I've got quite a few presentations, so it's making it a bit difficult. But coming to that is noting the landlocked nature that we've got in terms of the Namakwa SEZ is not to say that it's changing any paradigms per se. It's actually making it a bit to our side. The overcoming factor for us is then basically looking at the situation to put us in a position whereby we can then literally move into the phase whereby we can use a corridor approach to unlock this landlocked nature of it. So port of entry, port of exit is no more the departure point that we have. It is for us now a situation to say, and it's breaking back to say the extraction theory. No more is a situation of just the extraction resource point, but that resource point is also a consumption point at the end of the day. Thank you very much. It's also the consumption point at the end of the day, which makes it for us far easier. So we want to say, let's reverse then the effect of the extraction point theory, whereby we just have extraction point theory, but let us also then interface in terms of looking at what we can do on a regional patterning. Now, in principle, this is very important, and especially in the western part of SADC. Now, if we go to the background information there, if we go to the next slide, and there I'm not going to spend too much time on the general side. I think just very important is that the principle of port of entry, port of exit, designated area is very important, and this is for taxation purposes and fiscal control and governance. But very important in addition to that, though, has come that SEZs and resource principles, and with the essence of globalization, has become regional integrated industrial areas. And that special SEZ as a designated zone for value addition, but also for location, co-location of services is then very important. And this is the approach that we take. And this is literally, as Mr. Maotumo Lefane said, the citywide SEZ principle. Now, if we look at the Namakwa SEZ, we do know that the West Coast, literally beyond Cape Town and Saldanha, beyond that, it becomes a very difficult area. The land mass, the density of population, the areas to be covered due to the land mass, the structural capacity that's available in terms of energy, water, and then transport, telecommunication, and then the human capital available for enabler is too dispersed, is too wide away from markets. So in essence, what we then did is to say this area is not landlocked per se, I think if we look at the situation, if we look specifically at Mauritius, I think the Mauritius areas is very important for us. We use that as a reference. And then also if we look at the Paul Roma acknowledgement to say that SEZs is reform zones and it's not concession zones, meaning to say we need to reform the economy of the west coast of SADC. That then inclusive to say that there's a regional service hub where value addition can take place, where services can be anchored. And to be practical about that is what we are looking at now is we are looking at the situation for petrochemical, a petrochemical hub for this area. Because remember, the service zone that we are looking at is servicing then basically parts of the Northern Cape, then parts of the Western Cape, even up to the Gamagara mining corridor, known as the iron ore and manganese resource of the world, literally, that is Katukuruman, and then extending into parts of Botswana, Namibia, up to even parts of Angola, certain of these services. One of the point in case of that is basically where this regional service hub now of the latest magnitude is that we are looking at South Africa importing 60 to 80% of our fertilizer. And we're moving into a notion whereby we can, in this area, and based on the unique business case, can start producing fertilizer that can access these markets. A further principle that we are also seeing is the consolidation of volume of production. And we specifically see that then, for instance, in the Vedanta zinc investment scenario, where we have a consolidated consolidation of volume, and we then utilize it and add value. But very important is that the interlink of your regional pattern and your corridor with specific clusters and nodes. Now, if you look at the SEZ Act, provision is made for free port, free trade, port of entry and sector development zone. So what we are looking at now currently is whereby we have the sector development zone for the Namakwa SEZ, which is situated in Aggeneys, Gamsberg, which is around about 250 kilometers from the coastline. And at the coastline then is the development on track for the Buchu Bay Deep Port Harbor. So the moment that intertwines the import of consumable goods, but also the export to the global market becomes then very important for us. And therefore, we then literally use this corridor to interlink all these elements then. When we go to the next slide, you will also see, and these questions there basically always then look at what is the nature of a business case for SEZ sustainability that we have to focus on. Yeah, brilliant. Sorry, colleagues, we just, the program is running late and I'm running late for a next program. So I'm just trying to manage all of those. If we look then at the SEZs are critical catalyst to trigger industrial activities and for region job creation, industrialization. Now, if we look at the situation of the Namakwa SEZ, the catalyst in that instance was the consolidation of the Vedanta Zinc International ore commitment that they then gave, meaning to say ore originating from SADC countries, neighboring SADC countries, and then from the direct area of operation, and then translating that into ore processing and zinc smelter facility, but not just the zinc per se, which has then got medicinal, pharmaceutical, and related manufacturing opportunities, but also then a byproduct of 450,000 tons per annum of sulfuric acid, and the sulfuric acid then basically interlinking. And when that initiated, agriculture, 4,500 hectares of irrigation along the Orange River became possible. And the latest offset that we also have is, which is a very exciting new investment. And here we're having investment being led by the Hive Group from Britain, Rotterdam Harbour, Sasol extending tremendous interest, is the green hydrogen and ammonia. We know that one of the critical resources of the Northern Cape is that we've got ample renewable energy, wind during day, wind at night, and solar during daytime. Now, if you move into the new hydrogen market and the hydrogen, I nearly want to say the hydrogen regeneration of the energy sector, looking at turbine technology, looking then furthermore at huge movement technology, i.e. rail and then trucking scenarios as a start off, and harnessing that energy. Within 10 years, it's deemed that these industries, in terms of turbine technology, heavy hauling technology, will transition to green hydrogen as the energy source. And globally, the Northern Cape has been identified as the resource based on the principle of our renewable energy, because your biggest input cost remain energy. And with our wind and solar resource and ample land mass, that means we can start putting under mirror and under wind turbine 30,000 consolidated hectares for energy generation to drive green hydrogen plants. So Vedanta in 2018, with the presidential commitment from President Cyril Ramaphosa securing the 26.5 billion rand Vedanta investment, unknowingly we preceded the catalyst, because when we declared this as an industrial node, all of a sudden innovation and the dynamic of investment then started happening for green hydrogen and green ammonia. Then moved to the point to say, but if that industrial cluster is available, we can latch on, because then the structural capacity of the economy and then the energy capacity, the transport capacity is enhanced to the extent that we can co-locate. So, ladies and gentlemen, for us, important in this business case was then further very important is that the green hydrogen niche is then the foreign shores of Europe and then the East. And they the key drivers and clientele currently for offtake as much as we can produce. So the harbor, the corridor again enables this by having, we've got our inland production site close to the river, close to the breast production or energy generating capacity, with a 250 kilometer access to coastline. Coastline gives us access then to the port, and immediately we part of the global village. So our core dynamic was at that stage initially was to say, okay, you've got a mine, you've got life of mine, and we all know the resource curse and the life of mine and the life of resource cursing that you have with that. Therefore, agriculture came up to the register as well to say, what do we do beyond life of mine to maintain this or this consolidated industrial facility under the Namakwa SEZ, and that was agro-processing and related services. In the meantime, though, the strongest argument for sustainability beyond life of mine then also came up in green hydrogen and ammonia. But just not in that, unlocking then the further capacity of fertilizer production, pharmaceutical production, chemical production, petrochemical service center for the region of West Coast of Africa has all of a sudden also arisen. So the catalyst, as mentioned, was put in place, and that then started unlocking. And this is the role of SEZ. This is the role whereby we can initiate the industrialization process. All of a sudden, we have industry co-location. And I mean, Turkey and Istanbul is a sterling example of that as well. And that co-location then enable all the structural capacity, the infrastructure requirements. It creates the corridor and the interrelated transport modes, which is required for import-export scenario. And that then generate new settlement, but also human capital and innovation coming forward. On the next slide, you will see that I'm rapidly advancing ahead of me. I think just very important for us, which we found in terms of SEZ sustainability, the critical success factors, political influence and is always important. And the SEZ is market driven, and that must also be politically influenced by us as government giving direction. If you told us 10 years ago we'll be putting up a SEZ in the middle of the Bushman land as they know it, and the desert, the Namib desert nearly, we would have told you you're insane. Even myself as a development economist would have told you it doesn't make sense. But with the political influence by leading the market closer to the resource and influencing the market, we had that. We had the vision and the objectives. We led the way by coming in, and our president was absolutely groundbreaking in terms of that. Our financial incentivizing, the cost of doing business always remain the key catalyst, and then government support, and then also noting that the quadro helix, this is a public-private partnership, and we have to take business on board. We have to take on board our knowledge partners. We have to take communities on board, and us as government have to play our role. But also the critical factor here is that it also can't be just large businesses versus SMMEs. We need that local ownership and entry points. On the next slide, I think in the next slide, we will have a bit more coming forward then in just an overview. And I think here for us important is noting why this SEZ is so critical. This nearly if we look at this map, that South Africa is a federal state, and while we a unitary state. So always neglected was the western, the northwestern boundary or the southwestern part of Africa then. And this is where we as South Africa is now leading the way with the Namakwa SEZ to address that. And geospatially, you can see the critical role that we'll play in terms of that. When we transition to the next slide, this is just once again giving you the geospatial reference and the importance that we have in terms of this site, and then also showing the influence in terms of the western parts of Botswana, Namibia, and then also pushing into Angola and parts of Zambia where there's already been interest for, i.e. the fertilizer, some of the sulfuric acid, etc., and then also the agro offsets. On the next slide, we can continue. Mr. Chair, this is basically just showing us then the geolocation and then showing the critical corridor. Now, for the point of argument in this conversation and this presentation, I didn't extend right up into Northwest and Gauteng, but even that hinterlands the corridor link up and the east to west boundary scenario, but also then where we start off as the Northern Cape provincial government is to say that we focus on the Kathu Industrial Park, initiative that is well acquainted and well invested by the likes of Anglo-American, Kumba, and then furthermore the likes of South 32 and then IDC. We then transition into the Uppington Industrial Park, which is also a critical element for us. And each of these with a bouquet of services in that cluster of that region, a cluster of businesses, varying from mining and mineral beneficiation, mining supply, up to agriculture, agro-processing and agri-supply. And then also looking, for instance, Uppington, not well known. I can tell you the most beautiful Porsches, Bugattis, Lamborghinis, and the latest artificial intelligence being tested in Uppington by the automotive industry. Also that we are the food basket. Literally, we've been inundated with communication from Russia currently. We know that Europe is entering their winter season, citrus, grapes, etc., any possible exports that they are trying to harness on for exports to their part. And needless to say, they're also asking for ample wine exports. But coming to that is this is the Uppington niche, and then also the Uppington Airport. And then we move to the initial catalyst that was there in the Namakwa SEZ, the zinc smelter. Well, let's start with the mining, the smeltering, and then also that then transitioning and excelling into what we then set the catalyst for green hydrogen, green ammonia, agricultural, agro-processing, and just continuously expanding. All of this then consolidating volume for export through the Bochu Bay Harbor. And that Bochu Bay Harbor then also interlinking for the import volumes that we can then see coming through in there. So the corridor approach is literally, it is not an isolated approach, it's an intertwined investment. The previous slide showed you the regional node and mode of operation which we are having, and then moving into that area where we are then focused on now. This is just, and this is what I want to halt with, Mr. Chair. I think critical for us is, and then conclude is, but the initial catalyst came through mining and mineral processing, and that then relayed into petrochemical, construction, transport, localization and supply development, pharmaceutical and food, agriculture, engineering and suppliers, and then manufacturing. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion is I think what we must identify is, and what was the throughput and the tipping point for the Northern Cape was, we identified the corridor. Along this corridor, we identified, and look, it was a position of trial and error. Initially, it was deemed to be the Uppington SEZ, but we just could not. Uppington SEZ has got a ceiling based on activity around it. But then we got the miracle catalyst investment of Vedanta, and when that catalyst activated, immediately it drew the attention of other industrial co-locators, and this is where the green hydrogen, ammonia, the agriculture and agro-processing, and then the regional service hub center co-locators then kicked in, and that created the critical mass of investment. So a private-led investment, which we as government harnessed and then directed through the presidency, led then to this investment, and through this investment, we've been able then to co-locate, consolidate, and not just in isolation that we do this investment then, but we did it along the corridor whereby we could consolidate volume, which is important, the landmass in the Northern Cape, the spatial the dispersion of infrastructure, resources, and activities. Along the corridor, by interlinking the corridor, we could then consolidate sufficient volume to warrant investments of this nature. And very important, though, is these are not just landlocked. They are definitely not landlocked. They are part of the global consumption market and the global buying market. And that was then again made possible for us by linking up through the Buchu Bay Harbour, but also hinterland linking the consolidation of the Kathu Industrial Park ending in the Buchu Bay Harbour there. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, landlocked SEZs is not a possibility even. If you're not part of the global village, you will not be able to sustain yourself. So landlocked SEZs can definitely survive. It is a reversal of the extraction theory. And by doing so, though, is the enablement in terms of transport logistics and interface with clientele has got a cost reduction benefit, has got a co-location benefit, and this actually makes it then globally competitive. And as we can see here, this is a classic example of the zinc reverse method, basically putting the smelter at the origin and then, or the extraction point, and that then co-locating other industries which find it worthwhile to co-locate then. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Hendrik. It's such an exciting presentation, and thank you for educating us. And clearly, Namakwa is a very complex and dynamic scenario. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and what you're doing and squeezing us in clearly in your busy schedule. I assume you won't be available for the panel discussion, but thank you very much. We really appreciate your sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the panel.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gents, what we're going to do now is we don't want to lose the DG who has to leave us. So we want to make use of the opportunity and maybe take just if you've got two burning questions for the DDG, Mr. Mahoto Molafani. You're welcome to raise your hand in the participants box so that we can recognize you, and maybe Paulo, if you can assist here in directing the questions. Thank you. All right, I see David Carl, your hand has been raised for quite some time. Is the question directed for?
Harry, it's JC here.
Yes,
there was quite a few questions that were raised in the session as we were carrying along. I just quickly want to get to the main issues that were raised for Moatu. You just give me a second. Right. I think, Moatu, if we may, I must just say that these questions come from the panel, and some of them are relating to the governance, some technology investment, questions about the inland port, the Springs development at our Tambo, or the Tambo Springs development, sorry, and then some property issues. If I may, to the first one, it asks about does the deployment of senior and experienced national representatives to SEZ boards not pose a risk from political interference in these projects? Should the focus of these boards not be that they should be elected from the stakeholders rather than political members? Your view on that, sir? Walter, are you still there?
Yes, thanks very much. The purpose of nominating national representatives has little to do with representing the interests of the DTI, because board members, they have their own fiduciary duties. So when you are appointed when you are appointed on the board, you are representing yourself.
Moatu, you're muted, I think.
He's working.
Am I audible?
Now we can hear you, Moatu. You can continue. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, you are.
Yes. No, thanks. I was saying that when we nominate individuals to serve on the board, it's not really that they have to represent the views of the minister or of the DTI, but really, because when you are appointed on a board, you are appointed there, you've got your own fiduciary duties, you are there as an independent person. But the intention here, that is why when we appoint a person or we nominate a person, because the nominee does not necessarily mean the employee of the DTI. It could be someone from the stakeholders. But what we do is that we normally engage with the SEZ and the province and identify the skills that they may need. So we identify a person on the basis of the skills requirement in the province. So it could be someone that is outside of the DTI, or it could be someone that is inside the DTI. But second to that, we're trying to try and create synergies, because there has also been a challenge at a local level getting the support from national government. But if someone is saying, well, I'm a nominee from national government, that person has got a direct contact with national government. A classical example is the issue of the visas at TASES. I was not aware of those issues, but the intention is really to ensure that we accelerate issues such as those. If, for example, there's an investor in Ngomazi who wants a facility, because normally province would just apply conventionally. So if we have a representative, that the intention is to ensure that we accelerate those processes. This person then notifies the DTI. We work with the province. So there is little interference. In all the SEZs, we have nominees from the DTI, and I think they all accepted and they all welcome that. In actual fact, when we introduced this, it was a request from the SEZs, not the other way around. Thanks. I think if I can deal with the issue of the Tambo Springs, I think the issue was, do we consider Tambo Springs as one of the SEZs, or what was the question, Jesse?
I think the question was, what about the link to Erythropolis areas with the SEZ? And any other, and are there any progress regarding the Tambo Springs Inland Port SEZ?
Yes, thanks for that. Look, I think I made an example about Dewey Trade Port, to say that Dewey Trade Port is developed at the back of the airport, and we're developing the Dewey Trade Port as a metropolis. But of course, the OR Tambo SEZ has also been linked to that. So we are currently working with the province. The province has officially approached us to consider Tambo Springs. Tambo Springs has never been part of the SEZ. It was just an isolated project, but there is now discussions. Part of that also is to ensure that we increase the footprint in terms of the land mass for the OR Tambo IDZ. One of the challenges that's confronting the IDZ is the unavailability of strategic land that they can locate. The current SEZ is located in a very small piece of land. Many of investors are even struggling to locate in Gauteng because of that.
Thank you, sir. I do note Mr. Charles Day and David Carr's hands are up. There was just one question I think that everybody wants to understand a bit more. That is the question about property and land ownership and the current model that it's all either state-owned or leased land. Is there any possibility for these to become more accessible from a private perspective? Is that in the plans?
Yes, the SEZ is legislatively driven. Our SEZ provides that the SEZ should be controlled or owned by the state. So the control and ownership are two different things. But the third one is the PPP. We are encouraging the PPPs because in that way we're able to share the costs insofar as the infrastructure. There is one that we're already exploring, the Dubatsi SEZ. It's adjacent to mining input supply park that is owned by Glencore. So that is one of the arrangements that we make. So we do encourage even the private sector to take initiative. The most important thing is the arrangements that we can strike, whether it's PPP or just agreements between the private sector and the state. So there is private partnership and we continue to encourage that. You can also build your own land on the leased land within the SEZ. In Atlantis, there are facilities that are developed by private companies on the land that they own.
Thank you, Moatu. I think I'm going to allow Mr. Charles Day. His hand has been up for some time. If you want to ask Mr. Day to come in, just maybe raise his question.
Thanks very much. My question is as follows. To what extent is there a conflict between the development of SEZs in the north of South Africa and the development of the Transfrontier National Park, which links the Kruger National Park in the northeast and the Kalahari National Park in the northwest? So there are plans afoot to develop a Transfrontier National Park right across that northern part of South Africa. And it seems that the SEZs in that region seem to cut right across that. Are you aware of these plans? And if so, what is being done to mitigate the environmental damage which SEZs are going to cause, and to the cost of the conservation of our natural resources and the development of the tourism industry, etc.?
Thanks for that. Honestly, I do not have the details. I'm hearing that for the first time. But I would be interested to get the details so that we able to respond appropriately. We've not heard of that project. We've not heard of the proposed SEZ yet.
I'll put you in touch with Sand Parks. I'm quite surprised that you haven't contacted them already as part of the environmental impact study.
Thanks, I would appreciate that.
I don't see the other hand that was raised. So there was another question from Andrew Baker, Moatu, that asked, would the City Deep area offer the opportunity for an SEZ to be established for freight logistics and agro-processing and agri-businesses to be stimulated in the area? Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I know of the City Deep, but at this stage is not one of the proposed special economic zones. I can confirm that in Gauteng, there is a number of proposed special economic zones. Some of them may be developed as industrial parks, but those that Gauteng provincial government is currently proposing, it's Vaal River City SEZ, is a project in the West Rand, There's science and high tech in the Bronco Strait. There's integration of Tambo Springs and the Gibela project in the Danota area. Those are proposed projects that Gauteng would want us to support. City Deep and others, we are aware of them, but they have not been part of the proposal.
Thank you, DDG. I think Mr. David Kau's hand is still up. I'm going to allow him as the last question quickly, and then we will see how we can progress the program. But we want to just allow Mr. David Kau quickly.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the invite. And just to quickly, for Ntatemlefani, to you and the DTI, maybe some of the extended partners in government, how are your programs, particularly the SEZs that we are talking about, how are they marketed to unemployed graduates, never mind people that are generally unemployed, but people that have some skill, the youth that are graduates of sorts in various aspects, but typically feeling hopeless at the moment. So, you know, if you look at all the protests in the country, you can always say these people have time or they are unemployed. That's why they are available, because no one who has a job would leave their job and go to a protest march and bend things, etc. But I really just want to know, in terms of the DTI, besides your website and, you know, people in the industry sort of knowing who interact with you already, if I'm sitting at home in Kroonstad or I'm sitting in the middle of Colesberg, I don't know that I can actually move to Rustenburg or Zeerast or to the part of the Eastern Cape where there's some activity and some job activity where my skills could be needed. So largely, really, my main question is, South Africa, we're suffering a lot from either not having information or lack of information or even misinformation. I think we all believe people know or people should know. So if you think of the number of people that have cell phones in their hands, that are online, that are consuming data in this country, the majority of the country, whether poor or rich, there's a reason when you're, you know, playing on the internet and watching these things on YouTube, an ad for a porn site, as a silly example, would pop up. And why not the DTI ad, or why not the SEZs ads popping up when people are all engaged and consuming so much stuff on their phones?
No,
why do we not know about these opportunities?
Thanks, and I
Thank
think
you.
You're raising a very fundamental question that is at the center for exactly what we're trying to do. And just to add to the problems that you are raising, in some instances, our people have information, but they don't have requisite skills. And a tactical example would be your mining towns. If you go to the Rustenburg area, Mohwase area, where we're building the SEZ, if you go to Dubatse, if you go to Musina, if you go to Namakwa, many of these regions do not even have a single facility or TVET college or technical. And not only unemployed, but even the potential entrepreneurs. Because one of the objectives of the SEZ, over and above attracting investors, is to create decent jobs, transfer skills, but also empower and build entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs. Now, the challenge becomes in a situation where we just built an SEZ with the intention of employing our people, but not assisting them in terms of skills, not even assisting the Black entrepreneurs in that region, yes, insofar as the enterprise support. You know, some of these entrepreneurs, they've got requisite skills for building, for maintenance, but because they are not educated, they can't even fill the tender document properly.
Yes.
So one of the things that we've put as a prerequisite is the issue of skills development plan. JC will tell you he's very much involved in our SEZ work. He has helped us in building the skills plan for the areas such as Musina, the areas such as Hujanala. So we are saying before we even develop or even designate as SEZ, the province municipalities need to demonstrate how are they going to support entrepreneurs in that region? How are they going to support unskilled people? So in areas such as Tshwane Automotive SEZ, as an example, we developed in a very short space of time with the support of Kucha that is experienced in these things, because they've had challenges. So, there's what we call people that business forums that always fight for 30% in the community. So they help us to develop a community engagement strategy. That community engagement strategy help us identify relevant forums, relevant youth organizations in the local community to assist them in terms of disseminating information. There's regular community engagements. There is a enterprise support or skills development support provided by the SEZ insofar as those entrepreneurs. You go to Saldanha Bay, they have the same. So there is skill development in the Musina Makado, where there's going to be metallurgical cluster. Although the challenge we struggle with the EIA, but the province has already partnered with the TVET colleges, including the Chinese investors, to train over 2,000 unemployed graduates and unemployed youth in that region. But we are also supporting the entrepreneurs insofar as, especially the SMMEs, in terms of how do they participate. Because as an example, in Tshwane, the PFMA set aside 30%, but in Tshwane, we've allocated 47% for SMMEs. But how do we then implement that? Yes, how to communicate, but also make sure that they are supported, because you can disseminate information, but the challenge would be they never comply with your specifications. So we also have programs to ensure that we support them to qualify and meet the specs. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I think
thank you.
We have, to a large extent, almost exceeded the expectations of many of the people raising questions. There are some questions, Moatu, that we will raise subsequent with you, people that have got some recommendations and some questions. We will unfortunately not have time to address all of it, Mr. Chair Harry. If we can move on to the final speakers, and then if we need to let Mr. Molofane move on to his other commitments. Thank you for your participation. We really appreciate the attendance of the DDG, of the department, and we will continue the open discussions on this issue. Thank you, Harry. I'm handing over back to you for now.
Thank you very much, and we're giving Mr. Corey Kotze an opportunity to talk from an investor's perspective. Thank you very much, Corey.
Thanks, Harry, and thanks to all that participate here. I just quickly, I've been asked by the organizers to be quick and sharp. Unfortunately, I've got one slide that I would like to share with you. Before I do that, I just would like to share with you why I think I've been invited to share from an investor point of view our experience and our expectations from SEZ to invest into SEZ. So besides the fact that we will, by the end of this year, be an investor in 4 of the SEZs in South Africa, and enjoy that very much, and very much the likes of think we are qualified to tell you what work, what don't work, and what we would like to see. I can also say in the same breath that we will not, as the AIH group, put ourselves, will put up shop in any other place than the SEZ because of the environment that's been created, if that is at least a positive spin on this. Besides that, we have been involved over the last more than 10 years in many exercises, trying and obviously succeeding as well, bringing investors into South Africa. Some of them you are very much aware of. It's a BAIC in Kucha. We've been very much involved with East London and many others. So I think we do have the colors, we do have the blazer to say we are qualified to think, to put ourselves in investor shoes and being an investor ourselves. With that in mind, I need to apologize in advance because I might give you the obvious. And sometimes it's good to share with you the obvious, that we can be reminded of why do we want to, what do we need to do to attract investors. And unfortunately, investors are not only international funding, it's obviously the likes of local guys that needs to set up shop and needs to be in the right environment. And we are one of those companies that is fortunate that we grow, fortunate that we are looking for environments and places to set ourselves up. What I've done is I have, when I've been asked to do this, sharing with you our view on what will it takes to attract an investor to a SEZ, I thought, let me give you 10 points. Obviously, there could be hundreds. And then I think the previous speakers have covered a lot of them, what I want to do, what there's a perception, etc. But I can only share with you what really tick our boxes and what makes us happy, and what will make us happy to invest further into SEZs. Before I do that, I also just would like to share with you that I'm very excited about the energy, the momentum, and the rhythm that we hear from the SEZ program. I must also tell you, for the last years we've been involved with it, from IDZs to SEZs. We were also wondering if is this just a new buzzword, SEZs? And needless to say, you've been through it this morning. I haven't listened to all the presentations, but some of the SEZs work and some of it don't. And that is not only in South Africa, that is internationally as well. So I hope with my 10 points, I can really tell you, let's go back to the basics. This is what we as investors need. This is what our so-called clients would like to see that we have worked with in the last many years. To start with, I would like to use the same word as Dr. Pierre Voges earlier. For me, location is extremely important. Obviously, you need to be close to something that hook you, anchor tenant. In our case, we have put ourselves up in the Dubai Trade Port. There was no anchor. It was our investment, it was our assembly opportunity that we had, but we wanted to be close to the harbor. That was our anchor. We wanted to be close to the value chain. You need to have something like that for sustainability and obviously for growth. Our other anchor is Ford. And then obviously our other anchor is the likes of Mercedes-Benz in the East London IDZ. And then obviously I can just imagine that anchors is like a new mine, or in the likes of the Atlantis SEZ, it's a green. And then obviously Namakwa it's some other drivers. But to put up a SEZ in the middle of the Karoo, it's tough. You need to have something. I don't think any you will have little to none opportunity to attract something, the likes of investor. Ease of supply chain, very important. It sounds very saucy. Obviously, you need to have an ease of supply chain, but it is extremely important. With all the exercises we have done, not only for ourselves, but for our client, where to put yourself up. It is how can you be part of a supply chain, the inbound, the harbor, the airport, the road, the corridors that we can talk at length about. It's been covered this morning. My second point, which is very important for us, and that is if we put up shop, or if I think my international investors will put up shop, it needs to be a plug-in-and-play scenario. If someone will show me a piece of land and say, we think that is going to happen, this is the potential timeline, etc., that is not really attracting investors. It needs to be a speculation. It needs to be infrastructure, needs to be ready. Like in most of the, fortunately, most of the cases, especially where we've been involved. If the likes of Dubai Trade Port or East London IDZ were not ready for us, we would have put up ourselves outside of that area in a brownfield environment. And I think we would have missed out on opportunity, and also the likes of the SEZs would have missed out on opportunity. opportunities. Then obviously a secure and safe world-class environment. And I know we as the SEZ likes to use it, industrial parks likes to use the word world-class environment. It is so important that if you bring the likes of an international guy here, that he can feel he is in the States, he is in Europe, he's in China. It should not have a feeling he is now in a so-called just a normal industrial place. That is our key to sell the place, and very much secure and safe. The reason why I share that obvious with you, we looked at about 50 facilities in the likes of Durban area to put up our plant. And we went to the most expensive one, and it was the Dubai Trade Port. Not to say they're expensive, but in that regard, they gave us exactly what we were needing. That besides the likes of your free trade zone incentives, etc., that secure and safe world-class environment. And I think if you want to attract investors these days, it's non-negotiable. Then the obvious, the free trade zone incentives, I think there's many, and you guys, I don't have to repeat what's been said this morning, but I think the two that's standing out for us is obviously the 15% company tax. We really enjoy that, and it works for us. It really motivates us, and it makes our business case viable. And then obviously your duty assumption while adding value, and that is that free trade zone customs benefit that one enjoy, and obviously it helps us with export and the programs that we're busy with. Point 5 is a very sensitive thing, and I picked up that it's been discussed this morning. It's wage incentives type of discussions, but you know, again, if I think about a SEZ or a special vehicle or a special zone, then you think about it's neutral, it's international. I still think we still don't have a friendly employer environment, a flexible one where we can make decisions. And I can't agree more that one needs to pay the people what the people needs to get, but there must be a protection against aggressive union activities, etc. And we need to have access to skills and structured labor. It's important, and I know it's a discussion on the end, but I think if there's one thing we had problems with all our SEZs that far was, it feels like as if you're just in a normal environment. And I would have expected a Kukan environment like that to provide, especially on employees, a better structure for us. And then again, the obvious, uninterrupted, affordable electricity, it's non-negotiable, water supply, connectivity, and general municipality services. We've been through this process on some of our other site selections as well. And I can tell you, unfortunately, your municipalities is not up where it should be. Being in a zone, it is absolutely one of the best areas, environments to be in, and non-negotiable for us. And then the establishment support, we enjoy that at the moment with the East London IDZ. We have enjoyed that with the likes of Dubai Trade Port, and that's that rental holidays that is going out of their way to see how they can help us. You know, the word incubation is also being misused sometimes. This is what I call helping guys that have a really opportunity to be successful, but help them in the beginning times when they set up, when the client is not ready for them, where they have to select a facility, and obviously rental holidays and preferential rates, and also help them with funding. And what is that? Maybe introduce them, the newcomers, to the likes of the IDC, the IDC and things and organizations like that. Access to government support. We really enjoy the customs that's on site in the Dubai Trade Port. It's one family. We transparent. They can come to us anytime. That type of thing, that you have access to the likes of the departments in the SEZ, like Labour and Home Affairs, etc. Home Affairs, obviously, because of expats, international travels, etc., that you need to ease of doing business and bringing them in. And then the last 2 points, ease of doing business. It's really important that, to use that word of ease of doing business, and that is to have a friendly landlord environment where you can go and negotiate, where you can really say, you know, I need more space. Can I rent some more space in your area? Or can you help me with this or that? It is a community. And I think that community ease of doing business is extremely important for us. And then lastly, it's the obvious thing, and is that utilizing that service sharing options like logistics, labor pool, people transport, etc., being in a cluster environment, being in the likes of a SEZ. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is my 10 points that I would like to share with you, and that I feel it's basic stuff, it's obvious stuff. Maybe the labor one is a little bit different, but if we invest, I will not invest outside of a SEZ in South Africa. To attract our guys internationally, obviously there's a few things that one needs to add to this, but creating this environment that we enjoy, we really hope that all the programs that you're running at this moment will result, and that more investors can enjoy what we're enjoying at this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Corey. Clearly, you understand the Bible business case, and without that, obviously, we can't talk about sustainability. Thank you very much for sharing with us, and we really appreciate your time. We trust that you're available to the panel discussion as well.
I will not be able to be available for that. I apologize for that, man.
Okay, thank you, Corey. We'll make sure that then should there be questions, they will reach you by email, and we'll take care of that way around. Thank you very much, Corey. We really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Okay, ladies and gents, our next presenter then is Mr. Dwayne Newman. He's a director of COVA Advisory, and he's going to talk to us about financier perspective. Thank you very much, Dwayne.
Thanks, Harry. Morning, everybody. Let me just see if I can get my slides working. Hold on, give me a second. Can you guys see that?
You can see that. You can just get that. That's perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, morning, everybody. Yeah, so I'm going to be just trying to take you guys through just a couple of issues. Yeah, obviously, the speaking last has always got its disadvantages. Obviously, all the other speakers have spoken about the stuff. So yeah, so I'm going to try and I suppose supplement some of the discussion that's been said so far. Take you through some of the issues I see in terms of site location. Obviously, Corey's taken through his own personal experience. I've also been advising companies setting up in South Africa for like over 20 years. So some of the issues that they take into account when they set up, I suppose, in South Africa, but globally as well. Try to take you through some kind of processes. Try to answer questions around, do incentives matter? Okay. I mean, we talked about earlier around RI SEZs really special, and I think it depends. Talking a little bit about South Africa's incentive landscape. Yes, we do have a incentive specific to SEZs, but I'm going to ask also to show you around. You mustn't forget the other ones that are floating around in the system, because otherwise you'll be leaving money on the table. And I'll close off a little bit about the SEZ incentives specifically. So I mean, all this slide is, I think, trying to, I suppose, talk to is, right, companies set up for a reason. They're looking at South Africa for a reason. So they'll have a strategic vision. So like the whole issue is why, what are they doing? Why are they expanding? Is it a market issue? Is it a customer requirement? So a company will have a strategic vision. And it's important to understand what's driving that company's strategic vision to think about having South Africa on the radar. Then they're going to start thinking about what they're going to actually do in the country. Okay, so is there going to be an R&D facility? Is it a manufacturing facility? As we see, the SEZs are quite manufacturing heavy in general. Are there going to be a disassembly operations, distribution, or some kind of shared services, regional services hub? Then you're going to start thinking about where you're going to have this operation. Obviously, in a lot of global organizations, I suppose if you had a discussion with, let's say, an automotive company, they're often competing with themselves for global locations. So I assume when Ford was setting up and looking at their investment in Tshwane, they were competing against other jurisdictions on the Ford landscape. So I think that's also important to bear in mind, to understand who you're competing against in the decision-making framework. You're often not competing against everybody. There will be generally a short list of countries that you're going to be competing against. And then once you can answer those questions, you go through some kind of process to make sure you secure the investor. And you'll go through a process of, I suppose, assessment of the country, a selection of the site. I know earlier we were talking about it's becoming a competition amongst cities, not about countries anymore. And I would tend to agree with that. I think even within South Africa, I've seen there's competition between cities for investment. So I think I always challenge the investment promotion agencies. Are we looking at South Africa first, or are we looking at region and city first? So I think it's always a challenge, and there are trade-offs in terms of that. Then I think in terms of doing some kind of detailed field validation, and that's where I think we find the incentive discussion starts to get raised around, okay, so what are you offering us? Does it matter to us as an investor? What are our criteria in terms of, and what are you competing against? So if South Africa is competing against Thailand or Brazil or some other country, do you fully understand the environment there, the incentive regimes there? Because it's quite hard to pitch against somebody if you don't know how the other environment works, whether it's from an incentive perspective, a tax perspective, an infrastructure perspective, etc. So this slide is, I think, just trying to say there's obviously various methodologies companies use to make a final decision. And what I generally find is executives like things on a one-pager. Okay, so take all the information and summarize it. And I think the thing I find is, I think, really important in any kind of site location decision is what I call critical location factors. Every industry is different. Okay, so don't assume they're all the same. Don't assume that a mining operation wants the same as a manufacturing operation. Also, not all manufacturing operations are created the same. They don't want the same thing. So a pharmaceutical manufacturer is not the same as a train manufacturer, is not the same as a automotive manufacturer. So just make sure you understand what the critical location factors are for that specific industry, and make sure you build that into the decision-making framework. And that's where I think different issues matter. So I think just some little case studies here I put up around. In some cases, we found on a jewelry manufacturer, incentives mattered. On a train manufacturer, the incentive mattered. On a renewable energy entity, financing mattered. And on the mining services company, incentives sort of mattered, but started to move down the criteria of importance. So in terms of, I suppose, the South African landscape, okay, I think what I'm trying to talk to on this slide is saying, please remember there are incentives outside what we call SEZ specific incentives, okay? There will be in terms of the initial design, so feasibility incentives, setup incentives in terms of infrastructure, feasibility projects, R&D incentives. And those tend to be at the early stage of any kind of project, okay? Understanding, is it viable, is it possible, investing in the early part of any kind of product or process or project development. So make sure you understand that landscape, because what we have found is sometimes if you don't leverage off those, projects can be stillborn early on in the process. And then as you start building up a business case, I mean, we were hearing earlier around the Atlantis SEZ. I mean, green is becoming, I think, a very important criteria in any kind of investment. It does open up financing opportunities. Okay, so we're finding more and more financing instruments, whether it's commercial banks or even DFIs, are putting green criteria in their financing criteria. Also, we are starting to see local and global legislation putting pressure on companies to be green. So we've got things like Carbon Tax Act, carbon offset regulations, and there's incentives contained in those rules and regulations and acts. Make sure you don't underestimate them, because it does open up financing, but it does open up incentive opportunities in the project development phase. Also important to bear in mind, there are energy efficiency incentives. So let's take in South African context the 12L energy efficiency incentive. Virtually every project I look at these days is trying to be more energy efficient, trying to use less power, okay, trying to be off-grid, trying to be using renewable power. Make sure you understand how you can benefit from these energy efficiency or competitiveness enhancement incentives, as I call them. Then also as well, I suppose very important in the South African context is the whole issue around enterprise and supply development. Make sure you understand that that landscape, obviously from a BE perspective, but also understand what incentives are available out there to assist your business, either to increase the budget allocated to those projects. Okay, there is a lot of pressure to invest in enterprise and supply development, and not just reduce the cost of the program. Sometimes double the size of the program, so it can become much more effective when it gets implemented. Then also as well, it's important to make sure that you understand what sector-specific incentives are available. Okay, so government has prioritized certain sectors, and you can go and debate all day whether you agree or disagree with the sectors that government is selecting to support specifically. So the most famous one is the automotive industry through the Automotive Investment Scheme, a grant program, or the customs version thereof, the APDP program. Then also look the other ones I've listed there: agriculture, agro-processing, black industrialists, film incentive, business services. So it is really important to understand what sector-specific programs are available for your investor, and generally those are all available to you whether you are in an SEZ or not. Okay. And yes, are they all rules-based? Do you need to understand the rules? It's not just about getting an approval for incentive, it is understanding what the underlying criteria are. So what you'll find is in most DTI grant-based programs, there will be a BE requirement, generally a BE level. Understand it, okay? Make sure you plan for it. It's not government's fault if they say you have to be level 4, and then 3 years later, when you claim in the grant, you're not level 4. I would say that's your fault. If you are applied for it, get approved, and don't comply with the requirements. So understand the landscape you are operating in terms of the sector-specific incentives. Some of those programs are obviously much more effective and much more certain than others. So that will be some of the, I suppose, generally the recommendations I give to government in terms of, so why has the auto sector been so successful? Is because investors can rely on those incentives that are there. The rules are clear, the goalposts aren't moved, they are designed collectively with the stakeholders in the auto industry. I can't say the same for many other incentive programs. So they are stumbling and falling, and the main reason for that is because some of the incentives are poorly designed. A good example is the agro-processing support scheme. I think in the last DTI report I was analysing, I think of all the approvals, only 8% of the applications have actually been paid out. That means 92% have not been. Okay, so that fundamentally means that the program is not working and is not meeting the needs of business. It might be meeting the needs of government, but it's definitely not meeting the needs of business. So the final point I'd like to make is just obviously in terms of the special economic zone specific incentives. Okay, so we do talk a lot about this 15% corporate tax rate. So there's been lots of noise around that over the last couple of years. One is it really effective? We heard Corey saying it does make a difference to his investment, and it will make a difference if you are profitable within a certain period. So it was 10 years. Now they've put a hard close of 2031 in the tax legislation in section 12 capital R, and you do have to assess yourself every year on do you meet the criteria. So I think it is something that DTI and other stakeholders of SARS, National Treasury have to look at and constantly look at, is it achieving the objectives of what it's designed for? Or are you, if you set up, you attract investment, an investor today with 2021, they're set up, they're operating in 2023, they're generally a capital investor, so they probably only start to pay corporate income tax 5 or 6 years from today, and with a hard close of 2031, so have you gone from a 10-year 15% tax rate to a 3 or 4 year 15% tax rate? Okay, so again, it's really important that that is marketed very carefully. A lot of the interactions I've had with investors and even with investment promotion agencies, there is a lack of knowledge of how the incentive actually works. And I've often have to tell investors saying, look, based on your business case, you are not going to get a 15% tax rate because of the underlying rules that you do not comply with. And virtually every brochure I see coming out of DTI or other investment promotion agencies, it nearly implies that you will be getting a 15% tax rate. Okay, so I think just be wary of that. So again, it's probably also about marketing and packaging the SEZ when you're going to investors. So the same advice I would give to the guys who are setting up the SEZs. Also important to bear in mind that it's not automatic. So if you set up and designate an SEZ, and the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition designates one, that to get the 15% tax rate, it also has to be designated by the Minister of Finance. And of the 10, only 6 have been designated to get the 15% tax rate. So that means that the other ones are not. Okay. So again, some uncertainty there, and uncertainty does potentially frighten off investors if they're competing against other jurisdictions which are offering the same or better corporate tax benefits. The building allowance, again, that's just an accelerated allowance, as I would call it. You're writing it off over 10 years as opposed to 20 or 30 years. There was some questions earlier around obviously employees, and the employment tax incentives is available outside the SEZs, but if you are inside the SEZs, they do waive the age limit requirement of 29 years old. So again, that's something to look at when you are employing people. There is a benefit. So you could be employing some experienced people and getting the benefit of the employment tax system, and ultimately reducing the pay as you earn you pay over to SARS on a monthly basis. The last two areas is the customs relief and VAT relief. So a separate provision has been implemented into the Customs and Excise Act under what they call rebate item 498. So you can get customs duty relief. It was not paid customs duty on import into that what we call customs control area. But it's really important to bear in mind that the SEZ itself has to be registered with SARS as a customs control area, and the business itself has to also be registered as a customs controlled area enterprise. Okay, and if you don't register all those in time, so when a company is setting up and it wants to get the benefits of duties or even VAT on the import of its capital equipment, and the zone is not properly registered, or the company is not properly registered in that rebate item, you will not get those customs and VAT benefits. Okay, so again, that's I suppose some of the challenges we've seen with investors. Even once the zone is set up, it's navigating some around and some of these rules and administrative requirements that face business in setting up and actually accessing these incentives from a real perspective as opposed to on a piece of paper. Okay, so Chair, I think that's probably all I want to say. I know we're running out of time, and maybe we can cover questions in the Q&A session. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, Dwayne. This was extremely interesting, and thank you for unpacking the SEZ the way only a financier like yourself can do. Thank you for educating us, and I'm quite sure they're looking forward to engaging with you in the panel discussion. Thank you very much. Ladies and gents, what I suggest and for us to do is to take a short break. I know we've been running over time, but I'm quite sure this is such an interesting session that you're giving us. So my suggestion is we take a short break of 5 minutes, just a biological and a grab a coffee break. I'll put up a timer and we will see you back in 5 minutes time. Thank you very much to presenters so far. Thank you, colleagues. Let's move back to our desks or workstations. We're going to do the panel discussion now, and I'm just putting up our program. We're going to request the panelists that's going to partake in this panel discussion to kindly switch on their videos and unmute themselves so that I can bring them into the deck. And I know we've got Mr. Warwick Lord who also agreed to participate. So Warwick, if you can kindly also switch on your camera, I really appreciate that. And then JC, thank you for facilitating our session. We're going to put you guys all in the JC, over to you, and I'm busy bringing in the guys for you.
Thanks, Harry. I just want to confirm that we will carry on until 12 o'clock.
Yes, I'm sure if they will forgive us if we go on 10 minutes or so later.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to maybe start by just before we get to all the questions, allow Mr. Warwick Lord just to also ask him to give his opinion from a purely transport operator perspective. It's a bit different than many of the other stakeholders might have experienced. Mr. Lord, if you just want to very quickly summarize what your feeling is about what was said to date and how that impacts on the transport environment.
Thank you very much. And just for those who don't know me, my name is Warwick Lord, and I'm the CEO of the Cater Ridge Logistics Hub Consortium. I saw a lot of comments regarding the Tambo Springs dry port, and we're the developers undertaking the Cater Ridge dry port development in eThekwini. It's interesting, and I did say to JC before he got on, before he asked me to be a panel discussionist, that I do have my views are slightly different on the SEZ than I think most of the participants that have been on the group so far. And specifically in that we've been asked and requested by numerous of the government clusters for us to consider being an SEZ out in Cater Ridge, and sort of the response to date has been the following. The SEZ, as far as we can understand the legislation, and we know we're near an expert like some, especially Dwayne, I heard the end bit of your conversation, know it obviously a lot better, is that it's aimed at manufacturing, and therefore as a predominant logistics division or logistics operational hub, we don't qualify for a lot of those incentives as it's very much geared towards manufacturing. So that is, as a starting point, becomes quite difficult. And then added to the fact that at the moment that only public sector entities can have an SEZ designation and be running it as a public sector operation, that obviously also precludes precludes the private sector from getting involved in it. So for those two reasons, it's been quite problematic. And also the third reason is the fact that historically SEZs, IDZs have been situated in areas that government have looked to create or push employment due to an area that hasn't had those sort of benefits in the past. Whereas in the private sector, what we look to do is we don't go around the country looking for which areas require development. We look for where the need is, where there is demand, and then we look to plug that supply or supply that demand. And I did notice that the earlier conversation from Molofane was that that this is definitely going to be the way it's now going to be approached from an SEZ perspective, but my historical experience with that, specifically where they've been located, have made them more desirable to have economic growth in that area as opposed to be fulfilling a demand that's already existing there. So just by way of introduction, hi guys, that's me. Let's jump into the conversation.
Thank you for that, Mr. Lord. It's nice to have you on board as well. I think one of the things I just want to raise quickly, Pierre, there was a question maybe I think directed to you, specifically around, in terms of your experience with the Atlantis SEZ, whether you think it's important for a private sector-led anchor to be an attractor for investments. I know that you've got a big renewable energy tenant currently, but that's not necessarily like a Ford that the Tshwane Auto SEZ might have. How important is it for an SEZ to have a private sector-driven demand to attract tenants to the SEZ as subsequent service providers or input suppliers or whatever the case might be? Do you think it's a critical element?
Can you hear me? Has to answer it now.
Yes, please. Yeah, you can. Thank you.
I think it's an important question. I think that if you have a smaller SEZ with more smaller investors than the bigger investors, then I think it's important to have an anchor tenant. And we believe GRI at the moment is an anchor tenant. And we hope the expansion will go through so that it'll also create that sort of downstream manufacturing in the SEZ itself. There was a company called Resolux that manufactured not the wind turbines, that's done by Gestamp. They manufacture the internal parts of the wind turbines. So that kind of thing. So the wind turbine is manufactured by one company, but the other parts and pieces are manufactured by other companies in the SEZ. So it's a young SEZ, but I'm hoping that that will be the case. I think it's an important question. I think in any property development, and I still think SEZ should be seen as industrial property developments, that an anchor tenant then becomes very, very important, where the other tenants kind of feed from. I know one or two other SEZs did go for bigger investments that require massive capital investment, and they did not materialize. So when you go for an anchor tenant and you hope that your downstream manufacturing originates from that, I suppose the overall risk of the SEZ going forward may be a bit less. I don't know if I've answered that question.
I think it's been done. Thanks, Pierre. Yeah, I think we've picked up that, you know, a driver from a demand perspective is very important to attract additional investment into an SEZ. Are there any other people that want to raise a hand at this stage to raise more questions? Otherwise, I'm going to go to some of the notes that were in the discussions earlier on. Please do raise a hand if you want to say something. I think one of the other things that were raised during the discussion is energy security and how important that is. And again, I think this was while you were talking, unfortunately, Pierre, people were asking, what does the SEZ do to make sure that they secure enough energy for the tenants that do come into the SEZs? Sorry to put you on the block again.
Look, it's important. I think from our side, the water matter is extremely important. Some of the industries in the SEZ now, like K-Tech, they manufacture industrial sheeting from recycled plastic. I mean, they are a big energy user. So we know that the energy is okay, but you don't know if the provision thereof will be continuous or not interrupted. I mean, that's the point. So we have asked the CSIR to do more work for us on how we can actually be less dependent on Eskom in terms of energy. But the solar systems on the roof is just one way for us to secure a further revenue stream to bolster our revenue model. But it's also a way for that SEZ itself to become less dependent on Eskom. I don't think you'll ever be fully independent, but being less dependent and look after yourself a bit better. But these days, JC, I mean, a couple of things come up when you try and attract an investor. They're looking at infrastructure, as Paulo and Mauto has said. The water matter comes up all the time. The power matter comes up all the time. You're not going to skip those. Industry uses power and they use water or both. But if you can't find a satisfactory answer on that, then you're in trouble. So on the power side, we're hoping to make that investment by solar on roofs, for instance, and maybe the further work that the CSIR is doing, being a participant in the process of becoming less dependent on Eskom power. And secondly, also possibly, hopefully, for the SEZ company, the entity, to secure stronger revenue streams going forward. But those are brutal things that we just mentioned, those factors that need to be answered satisfactorily when it comes to any query from an investor.
Thanks, Pierre. I think if I may lead the discussion again, Warwick, there was quite a few questions and quite a few comments from, I think, Frans van der Walt and some other players that were on the call earlier. I don't know if they're still here, about the importance of these hubs, logistics hubs and stuff that's not really necessarily production orientated, and how that linked to the SEZs. I think Mr. Hendrik Lowe also alluded to the corridors linking. Mr. Moato Molofane mentioned the interconnectivity of the SEZs being important. And how is the transport sector seeing and the logistics sector seeing the huge potential that has to unlock some of these difficulties that the SEZs are experiencing? Maybe just a comment from your side in terms of what the approach is from the transport and logistics environment in that.
Okay, and then after that, I saw Dwayne, your hand come up, so fill in straight after me. I think it's important that logistics has come a long way in terms of our thinking. And not very long ago, it used to be called transport. We now talk about value chains, regional integrations, terminalization of supply chains. These terminals now form part of your complete supply chain, and then that's all just in time as well. And so what's happened is that the importance of logistics has come screaming to the fore over the last sort of 2 to 3 decades, with containers having to become a prevalent. And what that's brought about, as well as with the acceleration due to COVID of online retail, is a huge amount of effort required in logistics and the mass movement of goods. Now, what we see from our side is the fact that these SEZs are by and large manufacturing areas, and therefore this is the origination or destination of any of the trips required in order to get either their raw product in or alternatively their finished product out, and ultimately, if SA Inc. is to be successful, exported to the outer market. So I believe the hubs and intermodal projects that are currently on the go and looking to be delivered are looking to create an enabling environment for mass movements of goods, which will benefit the SEZs and any manufacturing that's looking to import or export goods. So that's how it would fit in. I don't see it. I've had quite a few discussions with Hamish Erkstein from the Dubai Trade Port, and thankfully he's on the SAPOA KZN Council with me. And we have had a few jokes about, the value of being an SEZ and the fact that it is purely manufacturing concerned. So it's not geared at being a logistics hub on its own, and therefore these hubs play complementary roles and they need to be working hand in hand and together with each other as opposed to fighting for the same turf. I hope that answers the question.
It does, thank you. I think, Dwayne, you wanted to maybe say something?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I was just linking maybe to the Pierre's comment around energy and stuff. I mean, obviously energy is a concern for every investor, whether you're in an SEZ or outside an SEZ. Okay? I think what an SEZ does differently to outside an SEZ is you've got an SEZ operator, okay, which is over the whole area, okay, a big industrial park. You go and compare that to industrial areas outside the SEZ, and we're obviously trying to help some companies where they're trying to collaborate in an industrial area, an existing industrial area, to put some kind of energy security plan together, okay? It becomes really much harder, right? Okay, because there's no infrastructure there, there's no, who do you speak to? Okay, there's nobody in charge of the zone, all that stuff, okay? So I think, I do see SEZs have got a really important role to play, and obviously energy security and water, to have a master plan to make sure that there is energy security. Because what you don't want to be doing is you don't want then the investors to be dealing with the problem. Okay, because fundamentally one of the reasons people set up an SEZ is because it's world-class infrastructure. Okay, so I think the incentives are important, but I think the role of the SEZ operator, I think, gives them a competitive advantage in other industrial or other existing industrial sites, because there's a central coordination point. So I think investors see that. I think Corey was talking about obviously his own experience in setting them up, and he wouldn't set up in any zone outside an SEZ. And I would think that's probably one of the reasons, okay, is because you're talking to one person and you can then deal with lots of issues as opposed to you speaking to lots of government departments, right? Okay, anybody who's try to help an investor navigate through lots of government departments, it's really hard work. I think the coordination, and you've got an overarching policy that's backed by the presidency and has been pushed through DTI and regionally, I think is really important apart from the incentive stuff.
Warwick, you raised your hand again. You wanted to allude to something.
Yes, thank you. I very much agree with that enabling environment, or that plug-and-play environment that gets created by having a master plan and having SEZ. My pushback to Dwayne is, Is it not, though, is that having operations inside what is basically a different country, i.e. this operator needs to run it on that basis, and generally done by a government entity in some way, shape or form, is that not more of a turn-off, those two negatives over the positive of having a central store or a master plan? Because on the big logistics developments that we do, we are doing the master planning, and you still have the benefits of this master plan and one-stop shop to interact with. You don't have the inhibitions or the difficulties that come with running an SEZ from an operational perspective, i.e. vehicles moving in and out, and 100 superlinks before 10 o'clock in the morning becomes quite difficult.
Yeah, I suppose, there's the pros and cons. I think my view is, at least you've got some kind of structure. I think your organization is strong enough to play the same role. Okay. It does need a lead to make it work. Okay, so I think that the SEZ operator, yes, they're in a legislative framework, so it's adding layers of rules on them. I get it, whether it's customs rules, operational rules, gates, all that stuff. Okay, so I think you do need to weigh up. Okay, is it more beneficial for your business? And it's probably back to the point I was making around, what are your critical location factors? And they're different for different businesses, right? Okay. So for your business, yeah, SEZ, no, okay. Is it that beneficial? You've come to the conclusion, no, not really. Okay, we're pretty strong enough. I work and operate in Waterfall City here. And that's obviously, that whole development's been driven by Atterbury and Attack, right? Okay. Private sector led on leased land, all that stuff. And it works, right? But you've got somebody who's strong enough at the top of that to be the lead developer and stuff, okay? And I think once you've got that, they obviously saw a demand, they're meeting a demand. So fundamentally, these issues get solved if there's a private sector led and a demand that's a problem that's trying to be solved. Then I think it works, okay? I really get worried when these SEZs are very much government led, okay? Because then potentially we are setting up the so-called white elephants, okay? Because then you're setting them up and then trying to attract demand. I don't see how that works. Okay. I think those are the ones I think are going to really struggle, and I think they're the ones that have struggled to date.
Thank you.
I think that also links up to one of the questions that Batu raised, specifically around, how's the more mature SEZ markets like China and so on, how do we measure up against them, and how do we look at what they've done to reform what we're currently doing? And I know that the only real SEZ operator entity that's still in the panel today is Pierre. Pierre, you guys, obviously we are government-led, like Dwayne said, and it's not a private sector-driven SEZ focus. Are the government starting to take into account those lessons learned from the other emerging markets like China and where the other SEZs are more private-driven? Or is the focus going to remain government and nationalized?
No, I think so. I think that I mentioned it in my presentation that the SEZ policy or the act had a very kind of social approach. The approach was poverty alleviation. And I think that those kind of factors that really attract investment, may not have been that prominent. And in this kind of thing, you need to put yourself in the shoes of the businessman, the private sector. You must think like the private sector. If you don't think like them, you're not going to create an environment for them to flourish in. And if a private sector company doesn't see a place for it to flourish in, they won't touch it. I mean, that's just a brutal reality. They want to make money. And all those other objectives, such as skills, training, and community impact, and all of that will only happen once you have established that company and there's a profit line or lines, a couple of profit lines in that SEZ. I think it's also people, JC. I think government these days in South Africa, and we must be frank, I don't think the gap between government and the private sector in South Africa has ever been as big as it is now. There's a huge lack of trust and credibility. And one needs to say that because it's one of the aspects that are kind of getting us into a serious problem. So you also need to have people in SEZs, the executive, the management, and so forth, that think very much like the private sector. If you don't think like the private sector, you're not going to create an environment for that private sector. And without that, well, You may have the nicest bridges and the nicest roads, but you need to sign that lease agreement. And you need to do that for the 20-year period. So I think it's a matter of, there is a shift at the moment, and I think it's a healthy shift. And that shift you've seen in many newspaper articles recently. But the people around you also need to be private sector minded people. That's what the private sector wants to see and to deal with. And that also sometimes may be a bit of a problem because of that trust gap, that deficit between the private sector and the government at the moment. And I'm saying it with respect. Factors led to that gap having grown a bit, and we need to close that gap. And you can close it in an SEZ. You may not close it in the full of the province or the country, but you can close it in that specific small SEZ of yours.
Thank you, Pierre. I think one very important thing you touched on, without tenants and without investors, you don't have an SEZ. You can put the best infrastructure in place. I think we are in a situation where we are trying to set up the enabling environments, but in many instances, because it's government sector led, it's much more slower than you would find the private sector guys move, and that competition for tenants and investors sometimes go to private sector developments as well. So it's very interesting to see that perspective, despite the SEZ incentives and so on, still the fact that there's quicker movement on private sector investments or developments sometimes still benefit the guys more than the SEZ. But that said, we had a view from Corrie as well that with the possibilities of service delivery issues and so on with municipalities and so on, that they still prefer setting up in a developed park or a developed institution or developed environment, other than just taking land from a municipality and doing their own thing. I think we are running a bit out of time. I don't know if there are any, Harry, if there are anybody that has raised another hand. I see there are still questions coming through. We probably will not address everything, but I think it's in our view, a start of a longer discussion and a lot more communication that will happen on this topic. And I do feel that, we've added value, hopefully, to the transport sector attendees and players that we hear today as well. Just to get a broader overview of where the SEZ program are, we all now know that there are some challenges in the system. It is how we address those and how we move forward of those. I don't want to take the closing remarks away from anybody, but I think if there's no more pressing questions from the floor, then I think we should maybe allow closure to take place. Harry, I'm going to then hand over back to you. Thank you, Pierre, Dwayne, and Mr. Lord, Warwick Lord, for participating with me in this discussion. I see there are still questions coming through. We will try and, as the organizers and sponsors of today, see how we can answer some of those questions. Maybe direct them to the people that were speaking today as well, and maybe have a follow-up discussion on this topic. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you so much, everybody. I think it was an excellent session. Maybe just quickly closing remarks from the panelists. Maybe if we can start with Warwick and then Pierre and then Dwayne and then Chase, if you want to do a closing remark then. Warwick?
I'd like to echo what Pierre said, in that there is a massive disconnect between what the public sector and the private sector think and do with each other. And as soon as we can break down those boundaries and have meaningful collaboration, we'll get the best of the public sector and the best out of the private sector working together to deliver on these very complex integrated goals that we need to achieve in order to get the economics and the logistics of this country moving the way we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Warwick. Pierre?
I think my job is easy. I don't see myself as an infrastructure expert or a green expert or any of these fancy things. It really is a matter now of creating trust in an SEZ. Trust from that provincial government, from the national government, all important. Trust from the private sector that they're dealing with an entity that will make them money. Once you can milk them for that money through your levy income, you can achieve all the other nice objectives such as unemployment and community impact and skills training and so forth. For me, that is the major thing to do in the next year or 2 or 3. Not an easy task, as Warwick just said. Not easy. Not easy. You're almost like pushing against a wall of mistrust and many other factors. But you know what? It's not insurmountable. Not insurmountable at all. And the smaller pocket you work on, the better you can achieve it. Put first things first.
Thank you, Pierre. Lots of wisdom coming through here. Dwayne?
I mean, I think platforms like this are helping to build those bridges between, I suppose, business and government. You had DTR speaking on this platform, so I think it's a really good start. They are recognizing there are challenges with SEZ programs. I don't think they're naive. I mean, what I do worry about is all the extra SEZs getting assessed and picking up. So we're going to have too many of them. We're going to lose focus. There's only so much money in the system. So we don't want then the Atlantis SEZ being unsuccessful because the money is being diverted to some other SEZ, which is potentially a non-starter. So I would ask government to really consider quite carefully whether they set up more SEZs as opposed to focus on the ones that are currently designated. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Dwayne. Much appreciated. JC, last word from you.
I'm going to allow Paulo to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you to everyone for participating. And I mean, just echoing the views of the other panelists, this is not going to be an easy situation. There definitely is a trust deficit. From our interactions, it is very clear that there is a willingness on the part of private sector to play a bigger role in the development of the industrial base, whether that be in the SEZs or not. I think that the rules and the government legislation at the moment is not always in favor of private sector participation. And I think that's one area that perhaps needs some attention. There is money in private sector coffers. There's willingness, and I think if that can be accommodated, that there's a real scope for cooperation between government and private sector in this development. I am encouraged by the sort of recent restructuring, that's my word, not the official term, of the SEZ program, with the move from Lionel October to the IDC. I think the IDC perhaps is a step closer to private sector investment. We did try to get Lionel to be part of this, but I think obviously with his move being so recent, we weren't able to. I hope that that move will see a move towards creation of a platform that's more private sector friendly. And I think with more private sector participation, we can all succeed. The success of the SEZs is not something that's on the government agenda. I think it must be something that's in all of our agendas, because ultimately it's to our well-being as a country and as Team South Africa. So thank you very much for that, Harry.
Thank you so much, Paulo. Thank you so much to the organizers of this event and our panelists. We've learned a lot from you guys, and hopefully we can continue the discussion in future. So we're also looking forward to that. All of you will receive emails, containing the links, to the pictures taken during this event, and also the YouTube file, because it's been streamed to YouTube. So afterwards you can have a look at the YouTube file, and we will upload the presentations being made available. So I request the panelists, those who haven't done it yet, kindly email me your presentation. I'll really appreciate that, so you can upload it to the web. So thank you very much, and let's give a big hand to all the sponsors and the panelists, and we look forward to seeing you guys again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.